It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. Fear is the currency of control. When people admire you, they might follow, but when they fear crossing you, they obey. In a world driven by perception, legacy, and influence, one name echoes through the corridors of power: Machiavelli. He didn't sugarcoat human nature. He exposed it. Whether you're navigating the boardroom, politics, or family dynamics, his brutal truths still strike a nerve. This isn't about being ruthless for the sake of cruelty. This is about winning and lasting. In the next 3 hours, you'll uncover the timeless, cold-blooded rules of power that have shaped leaders, outlasted empires, and still apply to your life today. If this is your first time on the channel, hit subscribe and comment below which philosopher you'd like to uncover next. Let's begin. It is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. At first glance, this rule sounds cruel, but Machiavelli wasn't aiming for likability. He aimed for truth. In The Prince, this maxim isn't a call for tyranny, but a brutally honest insight into human behavior. Love is a beautiful sentiment, but it is built on mutual trust, warmth, and loyalty, all of which are delicate, shifting, and often unreliable over time. Fear, on the other hand, is rooted in survival and consequence. It is instinctual, primal, and enduring. When a leader is loved, he relies on the goodwill of others. That goodwill can vanish the moment personal interest outweighs admiration. But when a leader is feared, respected, even dreaded, people think twice before crossing him. They weigh the cost, and that calculation tends to preserve order and authority better than affection ever will. Machiavelli did not advocate for cruelty or bloodlust. He made a specific distinction. A leader should be feared without being hated. Fear that comes from justice, strength, and swift decisions fosters control. Hatred, however, leads to rebellion. The trick lies in understanding where fear becomes abuse, and never crossing that line unless absolutely necessary. Think of great CEOs, military leaders, and political figures you've seen or even worked under. The ones who commanded with clarity, assertiveness, and an unmistakable edge. These individuals may not have been the most likable in the room, but their presence demanded respect. And when crisis hit, people didn't look for a friend. They looked for someone strong enough to lead. In business negotiations, being too nice often reads as weakness. In politics, being overly conciliatory gets you devoured. In family dynamics, always prioritizing likability leads to poor boundaries and emotional manipulation. There is a time and place for compassion, but in the hierarchy of power, fear is the steel frame and love is the velvet curtain. So what does this mean in practical terms? It means setting clear boundaries. It means not shying away from difficult decisions. It means delivering consequences, not empty warnings. It means understanding that leadership is not about being popular. It's about being effective. Those who lead to be loved often end up resented, used, or ignored. Those who lead with the steady hand of fear, tempered by logic, tend to survive and often thrive. Never appear too perfect. Envy is deadlier than failure. There's a strange irony in human nature. We admire success, but we rarely forgive it. Machiavelli understood this deeply. When someone seems too perfect, they become a mirror in which others see their own flaws and failures. That breeds envy. And envy is not passive. It is quiet, corrosive, and waiting to strike. Why is this dangerous? Because people don't usually attack the weak. They attack the untouchable, the shining example, the flawless figure who seems immune to struggle. When you make yourself appear without fault, you paint a target on your back. Others want to find the cracks in your armor, expose your humanity, or worse, bring you down to their level. In the world of power, this is a fatal miscalculation. If you appear too perfect, you incite competition and resentment from both below and above. Subordinates will scheme. Allies will distance themselves. Superiors will feel threatened. The wiser path, Machiavelli argues, is to allow small flaws to show. A hint of imperfection makes you relatable. It softens envy. It disarms potential rivals who might otherwise aim to destroy you. This doesn't mean you actually become weak or make real mistakes. It means you appear human. Strategic vulnerability, the illusion of openness. It's the politician who tells a self-deprecating story, the CEO who admits a mistake that was actually a calculated risk, the leader who lets others believe they had a hand in his success, even when they didn't. These are not failures. They're smokescreens. You'll find echoes of this rule in the most powerful people in history. Roman emperors who feigned humility, billionaires who dressed plainly, generals who let their men see their doubts before a battle. This is not about deception for its own sake. It's about survival in a landscape where envy is a poison and perfection is the trigger. If you're leading a company, team, or even a family, remember, show just enough struggle to humanize you, but not so much it undermines your authority. Don't broadcast your wins too loudly. Don't make your competence feel unattainable. People will admire it in public and plot against it in private. In Machiavelli's cold-blooded calculus, perfection is not an asset. It's a liability. To maintain power, be excellent, but never invincible. Be respected, but never flawless. Let others see just enough imperfection to lower their guard, and you'll keep control while others burn with envy, quietly, harmlessly, beneath your feet. Crush your enemy completely. Half measures invite revenge. Machiavelli, in The Prince, warned that enemies who are wounded but not destroyed are the most dangerous of all. This rule may sound brutal to the modern ear, but it speaks to a fundamental truth of human psychology and power dynamics. Leaving your enemies with options, pride, or hope is tantamount to planting seeds of future resistance. When you challenge someone, whether in politics, business, or even interpersonal dynamics, you step into a psychological war. If you strike them partially, perhaps out of compassion or indecision, you don't remove them from the board. Instead, you provoke them. You've given them reason to hate you, to fear you, and most dangerously, to plot against you. Machiavelli knew history was littered with examples of rulers who attempted leniency only to be betrayed by those they spared. A classic case is the Roman general Scipio, who spared the city of Carthage, allowing it to eventually rebuild and challenge Rome again. Centuries later, Julius Caesar was assassinated by senators he had pardoned and welcomed back. Mercy in these contexts was weakness, not virtue. The logic behind total domination isn't sadism, it's prevention. An enemy who still has a voice, an army, or a following becomes a dormant volcano. Even if they're quiet today, they're simmering beneath the surface. Their resentment grows in the shadows, fueled by wounded pride. And when the moment is right, when you're vulnerable, distracted, or aging, they return. This time, angrier and wiser. Modern examples are everywhere. In corporate takeovers, a CEO who leaves former executives in place often finds their authority undermined. In politics, leaving defeated rivals in powerful advisory roles often invites sabotage. Even in personal relationships, dealing with a manipulator or abuser half-heartedly often results in more pain down the line. To crush completely doesn't always mean physical destruction. In the boardroom, it might mean taking away an opponent's power base entirely, buying their company, removing their network, or winning over their allies. In politics, it might mean dismantling their narrative and credibility. In social spheres, it could be outing their intentions so publicly that their influence withers. The principle is, leave no room for a comeback. Of course, this principle must be used with surgical precision. Arbitrary ruthlessness makes new enemies. But when you identify a real threat, someone whose downfall is necessary for your survival or goals, half measures are the path to eventual defeat. Machiavelli wasn't advocating for paranoia. He was warning against naivety. When it comes to power, the stakes are rarely fair. And if you strike, you must finish, because the unfinished enemy is not grateful. They're humiliated. And humiliation has a longer memory than pain. A wise ruler never keeps his word when it no longer serves him. To many, this rule reeks of dishonesty. But Machiavelli never confused politics with ethics. He understood that power doesn't operate by the rules of idealism, it plays by the rules of results. When he said a wise ruler must not feel bound by his promises, he was pointing out that reality is fluid and circumstances often change faster than words can keep up. The world Machiavelli lived in was cutthroat, and not much has changed. Alliances were made and broken on the battlefield, in royal courts, and among merchant banks. The promise you made yesterday might lead to your downfall tomorrow. So, should you keep it just to be honorable, or should you adapt and survive? Machiavelli argued that survival, effectiveness, and the stability of your rule were more important than maintaining a pristine moral image. To him, honor meant little if your enemies used it to trap or manipulate you. He said, the promise given was a necessity of the past. The word broken is a necessity of the present. Imagine you're a leader who pledged to support another ruler, and now new intelligence tells you that ruler is conspiring against you. Should you still honor your commitment? Machiavelli would say no. Your word is only as good as the advantage it brings. If keeping it puts your people or legacy in jeopardy, then breaking it isn't betrayal. It's wisdom. This idea isn't just ancient cynicism, it shows up in modern politics all the time. Campaign promises are famously broken. International treaties are often abandoned when they're no longer beneficial. Even in business, contracts are rewritten, partnerships dissolved, and undies or NDAs violated when circumstances shift. Those who cling stubbornly to old promises often lose to those who can pivot without sentiment. But here's the nuance. Machiavelli didn't say to appear untrustworthy. Quite the opposite. A ruler must appear honest, noble, and reliable, even while being flexible underneath. Your reputation must be spotless, even if your strategies are not. It's the art of political theater. Say what they need to hear. Do what you must to win. This is why Machiavelli admired Cesare Borgia, who knew when to charm and when to deceive. He promised loyalty, then betrayed, when the betrayal served a higher goal: unification, power, or protection. Machiavelli didn't excuse betrayal. He normalized it as a tool for those strong enough to use it wisely. Of course, this philosophy isn't for everyone. It requires a high tolerance for moral ambiguity. But if you're in a position where you're responsible for outcomes, running a company, commanding a team, leading a family even, you'll face moments where doing what's right might not be what's effective. In those moments, clinging to your word just to look noble can get you burned. So Machiavelli's point is harsh but clear. Your loyalty should be to results, not rhetoric. Keep your word when it helps you. Break it when it doesn't. Just make sure no one sees the break coming, because power is not only about force, but illusion. Politics has no place for morality, only outcomes. Machiavelli didn't write for idealists. He wrote for those willing to face the raw, unvarnished truth about human behavior and power. And few truths are colder or more effective than this. Morality is a luxury in politics. Outcomes are the only currency that matters. In The Prince, Machiavelli made it clear that the success of a ruler is not measured by his intentions, but by his results. History does not remember the kind-hearted failure. It remembers the one who seized power, held onto it, and shaped the world. Whether he did so by noble means or by deception, manipulation, or violence, is secondary, if not irrelevant. This rule shakes many to the core, especially those raised on the notion that good always triumphs. But power does not operate on sentimentality. It operates on leverage, influence, timing, and cold calculations. In the real world, leaders are judged by what they accomplish, not how morally pure they remain while trying. Consider the most successful political figures of any era. Look beneath the polished speeches, the symbolic gestures, and the national pride. You'll often find shrewd deals, covert betrayals, broken promises, and strategic lies. It's not that these people are inherently evil. It's that politics is a realm where the stakes are too high to let abstract morality dictate every move. Imagine a leader who refuses to lie to protect national security, or one who won't make a temporary alliance with a shady partner to achieve a greater goal. Such rigidity, however noble, often leads to ruin. Machiavelli's point is that a good ruler must be flexible, not just in tactics, but in conscience. He must be able to act morally when possible, but also act immorally when necessary. And that line, when necessity overrides virtue, is where real political power is forged. This doesn't mean ethics should be discarded entirely. In fact, the appearance of morality is often useful. A ruler who is seen as moral gains trust, credibility, and public favor. But behind the curtain, he must be willing to make moves that serve the state, protect the regime, and destroy threats, even if those moves break every moral code he claims to uphold. Machiavelli's lesson is clear. If you're in a position of leadership, don't get distracted by the need to look good. Focus on winning, surviving, and shaping history. The world rarely rewards the pure of heart. It rewards the skilled, the strategic, and the strong. And when it comes to politics, the scoreboard doesn't track morality. It only records victories. People are loyal only when it's convenient. One of Machiavelli's most piercing insights into human behavior is this: loyalty is conditional. And once conditions change, once the cost of loyalty outweighs its benefits, it evaporates like mist in the sun. This truth applies to friendships, alliances, political coalitions, and even family ties. Especially in the realm of power, where every relationship is tested by risk, reward, and survival. In The Prince, Machiavelli observed how easily people abandon their leaders in times of hardship. When the state is strong, when rewards are flowing, when stability reigns, loyalty is abundant. People sing praises, stand close, and declare eternal support. But when turmoil arises, when enemies gain ground, when money dries up, when danger looms, those same loyalists often vanish. Or worse, they turn. Why? Because at the heart of human behavior lies self-interest. We like to believe we're surrounded by people who will stand with us no matter what. But in truth, most individuals make subconscious calculations based on cost and gain. When standing by your side is easy or beneficial, they'll do it. When it becomes costly, dangerous, or inconvenient, they'll start drifting or defecting. This isn't just a political reality, it's a personal one. Think back to any difficult chapter in your life. Did every loyal friend stay? Did every family member rally behind you? Or did you suddenly see the difference between those who liked your position and those who truly respected you? Machiavelli urges rulers to never place their fate in the hands of conditional loyalty. Instead, he advises creating systems of dependence. If people benefit from your strength, if their survival is tied to your success, they are far less likely to abandon you. But never assume they are loyal by nature. That assumption can cost you everything. The savvy ruler or modern leader knows how to use appearances to his advantage. He rewards visible loyalty, he fosters allegiance, but he never forgets that convenience is the thread holding it all together. And threads can snap. In a power structure, betrayal is not personal. It's practical. When a subordinate defects, they usually do so because they believe there is more to gain or less to lose by leaving than by staying. Machiavelli would say, "Don't waste time mourning betrayal. Spend it reinforcing the structures that make betrayal difficult or deadly." This rule is not meant to turn you into a cynic. It's meant to armor you with clarity. Once you understand that loyalty is fragile, you stop making naive decisions. You start investing in systems, not sentiment. You stop seeking eternal devotion and start designing a world where leaving you would be more inconvenient than staying. Power is not about making people love you. It's about making them need you. And when you understand that loyalty is a fair-weather force, you start building your empire for storms, not just sunny days. The appearance of virtue is more useful than virtue itself. Niccolo Machiavelli was a master of understanding optics, how things seem rather than how they are. In The Prince, he makes one of his most controversial assertions. It is more important for a ruler to appear virtuous than to be virtuous. This wasn't just cynical wordplay. It was a hard-won truth about human nature, power, and perception. Think about this in real-world terms. A leader who looks generous, just, and compassionate gains public favor and credibility. People trust him. They follow him. But a leader who is actually generous to a fault, fair beyond necessity, and emotionally attached to moral ideals might get taken advantage of, outmaneuvered, or seen as soft. Reality is messy. People aren't looking for perfect truth. They're looking for signals that reassure them. This is why Machiavelli insisted on mastering the art of illusion. To lead, you must wear a mask that suits the moment. Appear merciful, but know when to act mercilessly. Speak of justice, but manipulate outcomes in your favor. Praise honesty in public while negotiating in private. Why? Because society is built on appearances, rituals, and narratives. People will judge your actions not for what they are, but for how they're framed. Machiavelli observed that true virtue often comes with a cost. A ruler who is truly honest may confess truths that shake trust. A ruler who is truly fair might offend both sides in a conflict. But if that same ruler simply appears fair, holding court, listening to grievances, using the right language, he can control perception, preserve order, and maintain authority, even while doing what benefits him most behind the scenes. This isn't just relevant to politicians and kings. It applies in business, leadership, and social life. A CEO may not care about employee well-being, but if he speaks passionately about work-life balance and funds mental health programs, he earns loyalty. A public figure might not believe in charity, but a well-timed donation can skyrocket their approval rating. The image becomes reality in the public eye. But Machiavelli also warned, the appearance must be convincing. You can't fake virtue carelessly. If you're caught pretending, if your mask slips, the damage is far worse than being openly ruthless. The key is to seem consistent, stable, and virtuous, even when acting in contradiction. In other words, deception must be elegant, disciplined, and strategic. In a world that values branding over substance, where leaders are built on media image and selective storytelling, Machiavelli's insight is eerily relevant. Being virtuous may win you moral points, but appearing virtuous wins you power, and power to Machiavelli was the ultimate prize. Fortune favors the bold, but only if they're prepared. Machiavelli had a love-hate relationship with Fortuna, the personified force of luck or fate in Renaissance thought. He described her as a wild, unpredictable woman, dangerous, volatile, and resistant to control. But he also knew that boldness had the power to seduce her, and that fortune often bent in favor of the daring. However, he didn't romanticize boldness. It wasn't recklessness he admired, it was calculated audacity. In The Prince, Machiavelli made it clear, fortune might offer opportunities, but only those who are prepared can seize them. That's where true power lies, not in chance, but in readiness. Consider a general on the battlefield. If he waits for the perfect moment, he may never act, but if he charges too early, he may die. The successful general is the one who trains his army, studies the terrain, prepares for weather, and then strikes with courage. Fortune rewards that kind of boldness, not blind jumps, but leaps taken with knowledge, timing, and ruthless clarity. Machiavelli saw this quality in historical figures he admired. Cesare Borgia, for instance, who took great risks in claiming power in Italy. Borgia faced chaos, betrayal, and shifting alliances, but acted swiftly, often violently, and always with a plan. His bold moves made him feared and respected, even if he ultimately fell to bad luck. Still, Machiavelli believed his fall came not from boldness, but from a failure to prepare for the next wave of change. This rule also speaks to us today. Fortune in modern terms is opportunity, career shifts, investment windows, market timing, or even life decisions. Many people sit on the sidelines, waiting for a sign or for the stars to align. Machiavelli would call this weakness. He would say, prepare like a strategist, build your capabilities, read the moment, and when it comes, strike without hesitation. Boldness isn't just action, it's knowing when to act. A bold man who acts without understanding timing is no different from a gambler. But the bold man who prepares for battle, understands his enemies, reads the room, and then risks everything. That's the man fortune follows. Machiavelli's Italy was a violent, shifting world full of backstabbing princes and collapsing states. He knew better than most that life doesn't wait. You either take the moment or the moment passes you by. To him, fortune was a river. It floods and destroys the unready. But the bold and prepared can build dams, dig channels, and harness its power. So don't just wait for the right time. Make yourself ready. And when the moment comes, act, not with hope, but with sharp, informed courage. That's the kind of boldness fortune respects. A ruler must know how to act like a beast when needed. Machiavelli famously wrote that a successful ruler must learn to emulate both the fox and the lion, the fox for its cunning and the lion for its strength. This is not a poetic metaphor, but a stark truth about power. In a world full of deception, competition, and betrayal, purely human virtues, like honesty, kindness, or fairness, are often inadequate tools. A ruler, or anyone seeking power, must understand how to shed civility when the situation demands it, and embrace a primal instinct for survival and domination. To be a beast, in Machiavellian terms, means acting outside the bounds of traditional morality. Most people are governed by rules. They play fair. They expect justice. But Machiavelli understood that the world does not operate on fairness, and neither should a ruler who wants to keep power. The fox survives by avoiding traps. The lion survives by scaring off wolves. If you act only like a lion, strong but predictable, you'll walk into snares. If you only act like a fox, clever but weak, you'll be devoured by those with fangs. To rule, you must be both. What does this mean in real terms? It means knowing when to be relentless, when to be cruel, when to deceive or sacrifice allies, and when to discard principles that no longer serve your goals. It does not mean behaving irrationally or violently at all times. It means having the ability to summon that side of yourself when the situation demands cold action. Weak leaders are often indecisive, trying to maintain their image or moral standing while their enemies circle. They hesitate when swift brutality is needed. They pardon when they should destroy. Machiavelli would call them sheep waiting to be slaughtered. History is full of leaders who embraced the beast and were remembered for their effectiveness. Consider Catherine the Great, who secured her power by staging a coup and having her own husband imprisoned and possibly murdered, or Otto von Bismarck, who used manipulation and war to unify Germany. These were not men and women guided by sentimental values. They acted, often brutally, to secure long-term power and control. They knew what it meant to be feared and how to switch between charm and coercion when needed. Being beast-like also requires a deep understanding of timing. There are moments when appearing gentle and merciful gains you loyalty, but there are also times when any sign of hesitation is seen as weakness. The wise ruler recognizes when the mask of civility must fall and the claws must come out. This is why Machiavelli admired Cesare Borgia, who restored order through sudden, terrifying acts of violence, then blamed those actions on others to preserve his image. In the end, Machiavelli wasn't promoting savagery for its own sake. He was advocating for adaptability. The human being is bound by conscience, society, and emotion. The ruler cannot afford such shackles, not when rivals are waiting, not when betrayal is only a handshake away. To survive and thrive in power, one must understand how to become the beast, and more importantly, when to unleash it without hesitation or regret. Strike before your rivals can gather strength. Machiavelli believed that power is most easily defeated before it matures. One of the central ideas in The Prince is that enemies should be neutralized before they become threats, and this advice extends far beyond military strategy. It touches every form of political, personal, and economic power. The longer a rival is allowed to grow, the harder they are to destroy. Time, in this context, is not your ally. It is their weapon. Waiting for proof of disloyalty, hesitating until your enemy openly declares war, or giving them the benefit of the doubt, is a fatal flaw in leadership. In the world Machiavelli describes, intentions matter less than capabilities. If someone has the ability to challenge you, it's not their current actions that count. It's the potential they hold that should determine your response. Strike preemptively, Machiavelli says, while they are still building alliances, while their reputation is not fully formed, while their resources are few. This is not cruelty, it is strategy. We can see this principle in military history repeatedly. Consider Julius Caesar, who crossed the Rubicon rather than wait to be politically destroyed, or Napoleon, who often attacked before coalitions against him could form. Machiavelli understood that speed is power, and those who act while others are still planning tend to dominate the battlefield, whether literal or metaphorical. This rule also applies in modern business, politics, and social power games. Let's say a new competitor appears in your market. They're small, they seem harmless. But you recognize something: ambition, funding, innovation. Many ignore the threat, scoff, or wait until the upstart is large enough to pose a clear danger. The Machiavellian response is different. Undermine them immediately. Steal talent, undercut their pricing, corner their suppliers, absorb their customers. Do it before they become too embedded, before their story becomes compelling, before the world roots for them. The same goes for office politics. Don't wait until someone else is offered the promotion. cut off their rise quietly and early. This rule is built on a harsh truth. For you to rise, someone else often has to fall. It is not about fairness. It is about eliminating risk before risk eliminates you. Most people are afraid to act too early, fearing they'll be seen as paranoid or ruthless. Machiavelli would argue that reputation can be repaired, but lost power rarely returns. Additionally, striking early allows you to control the narrative. When you act first, you dictate the pace, the context, and the justification. You're not reacting, you're orchestrating. This psychological edge is priceless. Your rivals become confused, defensive, and disoriented. The public sees you as decisive, not aggressive. Strength, when used before it's expected, is often mistaken for genius. Ultimately, Machiavelli teaches us that hesitation kills. In a competitive world, you must train yourself to identify threats not by their words or even actions, but by their trajectory. Those who may one day challenge your position must never be allowed to arrive at that point. Preemptive force, quiet or loud, is not an option. It is a necessity for anyone who wants to not just gain power, but keep it. Never let mercy cripple your authority. Mercy is one of the most misunderstood elements of leadership. To the untrained mind, it seems like a virtue, and in personal relationships, it often is. But in the realm of power, whether you're running a business, managing a team, or overseeing a political structure, mercy is dangerous when it becomes habitual or sentimental. Machiavelli saw this clearly. In The Prince, he warned that leaders who show mercy too often, or in the wrong situations, undermine their authority. Why? Because mercy, when applied without calculation, signals weakness. It tells the world you can be manipulated through emotion, that you hesitate in delivering punishment, that you're governed by guilt or compassion instead of strategy. Once people sense that, they will test your limits. Let's say someone within your company underperforms. You give them a second chance. They falter again. You show more leniency. By the third or fourth time, what's happened? Not only have you lost time and efficiency, but others watching, your high performers, your competitors, have seen that your threats carry no bite. You've become the kind of leader who's easy to ignore. The same logic applies to disciplinary action, policy enforcement, or conflict resolution. If you constantly defer punishment or soften it to preserve goodwill, you're not protecting your leadership. You're slowly dissolving it. Mercy without control invites disobedience, entitlement, and eventually open defiance. Now, Machiavelli doesn't say, never be merciful. He says, don't let mercy cripple your authority. That's an important distinction. Strategic mercy can win loyalty. It can diffuse hostility. But it must be rare, deliberate, and always aligned with a broader purpose. You don't hand out mercy like candy. You use it like a scalpel, precise, purposeful, and only when it helps you win. One historical example. Julius Caesar was known for showing clemency to his enemies during the Roman Civil War. But he chose when and whom to pardon. His mercy had a message: I am strong enough not to fear you. That's not softness, that's dominance in disguise. Compare that to a modern manager who forgives underperformance or insubordination over and over, hoping to be liked or avoid confrontation. That kind of mercy isn't strategic. It's suicidal. Authority is built through consistency, consequence, and clarity. If people know where you stand and they know there's a price for crossing you, they will respect you. They may not love you. They may not even like you, but they will follow you. And that's what matters when you're at the top. So ask yourself, are you showing mercy to maintain control or to avoid discomfort? One earns loyalty, the other invites chaos. In Machiavelli's world, power is about control, not compassion. Use mercy wisely, but never at the cost of your command. Be a fox to recognize traps and a lion to frighten wolves. Machiavelli's metaphor of the fox and the lion is one of his most enduring and insightful lessons. It captures the dual nature of effective leadership, the balance between cunning and force. He writes that a prince must learn to imitate both animals. The fox, clever and alert, avoids traps. The lion, strong and terrifying, keeps predators at bay. Alone, each animal fails. Together they embody enduring power. Why does this duality matter? Because in any position of authority, you're constantly under threat from two sides, deception and aggression. Deception is subtle. It hides in flattery, in hidden agendas, in manipulative alliances. That's where the fox is needed. You must be perceptive enough to see through lies, anticipate betrayal, and navigate complex social dynamics. The fox teaches you to question smiles, to read between the lines, to sense when something is off before it explodes in your face. But cleverness alone isn't enough. If people suspect you're only a fox, sly but not dangerous, they'll test you. That's where the lion comes in. The lion doesn't need to talk. He roars and others back away. In power, that translates to being willing to act decisively, to enforce your will with strength, and to project dominance when necessary. Many leaders fail because they lean too heavily into one animal. The overly cunning leader avoids conflict, manipulates situations, and plays mind games, but gets devoured when real confrontation arises. The brute leader charges into everything with force, unaware of the traps laid in his path, and is taken down by someone more subtle. The most effective leaders carry both animals within them, knowing when to use each. Think of this in modern terms. You're negotiating a deal. As the fox, you study the contract line by line. You read the body language across the table. You see the clause that could be a trap 5 years down the road. But then comes the lion. You push back, threaten to walk, raise the stakes. Your counterpart realizes you're not just intelligent, you're formidable. Or imagine managing internal office politics. The fox sees who's aligning with whom, who's whispering in meetings, who's gunning for your position. The lion calls a meeting, sets the tone, and makes it clear. I see everything. Don't mistake my silence for weakness. In every arena, business, government, even family, the fox and the lion are both necessary. Your instincts must be sharp enough to avoid being fooled. Your presence must be strong enough to make fools think twice. This rule is about adaptability. The battlefield of power is constantly shifting. Sometimes guile wins the day. Other times, only sheer force will do. Know when to scheme. Know when to strike. And if you master both, you become untouchable. Control the narrative, or someone else will. In the realm of power, perception is reality. That's one of Machiavelli's most crucial lessons, even if he never stated it in those exact words. When we say control the narrative, we're talking about shaping how people understand events, decisions, and leadership. It's not enough to take action. You must also control how that action is interpreted. Why is this so important? Because the masses, and even your closest allies, rarely see the full truth. They respond to stories, appearances, and emotional cues. If you allow others to tell your story, they will do so with their own agendas. And once their version takes hold, clawing your way back to truth is like fighting quicksand. Machiavelli understood that rulers needed to master appearances. It is not essential, he said, that a prince should have all the good qualities, but it is essential that he should seem to have them. In modern language, it doesn't matter if you're virtuous, only that you're seen as virtuous. That's narrative control. Let's take this to the present. In business, the CEO who steps down quietly is either perceived as retiring gracefully or being ousted in disgrace. Which version wins? The one that hits headlines first. In politics, an apology can be seen as genuine or weak, depending on who frames it. In personal life, your silence after a mistake can either look mature or suspicious, depending on what someone else says about it. Those in power must speak first, and often. When you speak last, you're reacting. When you speak first, you're defining. Every institution understands this. That's why press releases, branding campaigns, spin doctors, and PR firms exist. They're not just selling ideas, they're shielding influence. Machiavelli might have said, "Silence is a luxury for the powerless." When you're silent, people fill in the blanks with assumptions, and those assumptions often benefit your rivals. Think of wartime propaganda. Think of how historical figures are remembered. Julius Caesar's assassins thought they were saving the Republic, but history cast them as traitors. Why? Because Caesar's supporters controlled the narrative after his death. The same goes for Napoleon, Lincoln, even Machiavelli himself. His name is often synonymous with manipulation, but few have actually read The Prince to understand his logic. That's narrative power in action. The practical application? In leadership, you must constantly frame your decisions. Anticipate how they will be misunderstood and address those misunderstandings before they take root. In every organization, someone is writing the unofficial story. Your team, the public, your competitors. If you don't do it, they will. This doesn't mean lying. It means curating, highlighting, choosing your language. It's understanding that facts alone don't persuade, stories do. And in the end, the one who controls the story usually ends up controlling the outcome. So if you wield power, or aspire to, you must think like an author. Don't just live history. Write it. Because if you don't, someone else will, and they won't make you the hero. Laws are obeyed by the weak. Power is respected by all. Machiavelli's worldview was unapologetically raw. To him, laws were not sacred moral documents. They were tools used to keep the lower classes and the powerless in check. This rule doesn't suggest that laws are unimportant. Rather, it reveals a brutal hierarchy. The strong obey laws when convenient. The weak obey them because they must. Throughout history, laws have been the illusion of order. They are created by those in power to regulate behavior, maintain control, and punish disobedience. But here's the catch. Those who write the laws are rarely held to the same standard. From monarchs to modern CEOs, those with enough power find ways to bend or sidestep the rules. The rules are there for others. Machiavelli pointed out that stability requires law, but dominance requires the ability to act above it. He admired leaders who knew when to respect the law publicly and when to ignore it privately. To him, a prince who strictly followed every law would eventually be crushed by rivals who didn't. So he advocated a flexible conscience. When the law served you, use it. When it limited you, discard it, quietly or with justification. This is not cynicism. It's a tactical lens. You can see it everywhere. In politics, legal loopholes are exploited to pass controversial agendas. In corporate life, companies move their headquarters overseas to evade taxes. Entirely legal, yet entirely manipulative. In international relations, countries violate treaties or trade rules whenever it suits their national interest and face minimal consequences if they're powerful enough. But Machiavelli was also precise in his observation. Power is what commands respect. Not the law, not titles, not virtue. strength. People may admire a rule follower, but they'll bow to a rule breaker who cannot be punished. That's why enforcement is everything. A law without teeth is a suggestion. A powerful figure with no accountability becomes the real law. Yet there's nuance here. Machiavelli didn't suggest leaders should appear lawless. On the contrary, the powerful must pretend to be law-abiding citizens. This illusion is vital. It maintains order among the masses and builds the image of stability. But behind the curtain, true power lies in knowing when to break the law and having enough leverage that no one dares to call it out. This principle also explains why whistleblowers are often crushed, not praised. It's not about justice. It's about hierarchy. The moment someone exposes a powerful figure's violation, they're a threat to the entire structure. That structure then protects its own because it survives through control, not fairness. So, what does this mean for you? If you live strictly by the rules in a world where others don't, you're at a disadvantage. That doesn't mean you must become lawless. It means you must understand the system, know when to comply, when to exploit, and how to avoid being caught in a net meant for weaker prey. Because in Machiavelli's world, and ours, laws create order, but power enforces it. And when the two collide, power almost always wins. Weakness invites betrayal. There is a brutal, unspoken truth about power. People betray the weak, not the strong. Machiavelli understood this deeply. In The Prince, he wrote about the importance of appearing firm, decisive, and above all, in control. Because the moment a ruler appears unsure, fragile, or vulnerable, predators emerge, and betrayal follows. This rule isn't just a warning, it's a survival mechanism. Think of a pack of wolves. When one limps, the others take notice. It's not cruelty, it's instinct. Weakness in the wild signals an opportunity. The same principle applies in boardrooms, governments, family dynasties, and any hierarchy where power is in play. When people sense you lack resolve, they start whispering. When they see hesitation, they begin scheming. And when they feel you can be pushed, they push, until you fall. Machiavelli believed that betrayal is not a result of evil hearts. It's a result of calculation. People betray when they think they can get away with it, when the cost is low and the gain is high. And nothing lowers the cost of betrayal like visible weakness. This doesn't only mean physical or military weakness. It means inconsistency in your decisions. It means excessive emotion in moments that require logic. It means being too forgiving with those who wrong you or too hesitant when it's time to act. These behaviors, while they may stem from compassion or humility, are interpreted as signs that you lack what it takes to maintain power. You might think your allies appreciate your softness. You might believe that showing vulnerability builds trust. But Machiavelli would argue that such moments do the opposite. They embolden the ambitious, empower the envious, and awaken the opportunists. Every small surrender chips away at your authority, and eventually someone will come to collect what's left. Does this mean you must be heartless? No. But it means you must be strategic with when and how you show mercy or doubt. Your decisions must be deliberate, not reactive. When you are firm, even in punishment, you send a message: I will not be crossed without consequence. History is full of leaders who lost everything because they projected weakness at the wrong moment. Kings who pardoned treacherous nobles only to be killed by them later. CEOs who tried to appease their inner circles only to be ousted in boardroom coups. Presidents who hesitated when force was required, and in doing so, lost respect and allies. The psychology behind betrayal is simple. People look for safety in strength. They fear crossing someone who commands control. When that fear disappears, the loyalty it upheld disappears with it. To live by this rule, cultivate the habit of strength, not bravado, not arrogance, but composed, grounded power. Stand by your principles, act decisively, and don't show your hand when your nerves shake. Let others wonder, what would happen if I betray him? And make sure the answer is always something painful. Your reputation is your weapon. Guard it with paranoia. Niccolo Machiavelli knew that power rarely comes from what you are. It comes from what people believe you are. And that's why he treated reputation as a weapon, a blade that cuts both ways. It can carve out respect, fear, and obedience. But if dulled, it invites doubt, disrespect, and ultimately rebellion. In The Prince, Machiavelli didn't say to be honest, kind, or virtuous. He said to appear that way when it serves you. Your true nature is irrelevant if your reputation commands loyalty and fear. Reputation is perception, and perception is power. Now here's the truth that most people ignore. Your reputation doesn't belong to you. It lives in the minds of others. You can't touch it. You can only shape it through behavior, symbols, and relentless control over what people see and hear about you. That's why Machiavelli would advise, guard it with paranoia. Because once damaged, it's nearly impossible to fully restore. Reputation determines whether allies stand beside you or hedge their bets. It determines whether enemies strike openly or hesitate. A reputation for decisiveness, strength, cunning, and follow-through becomes a shield, one you don't even have to raise, because your enemies fear what might happen if they move against you. The problem? One crack in your reputation can trigger a landslide. If people see you being disrespected and you do nothing, they take note. If you allow an insult to go unanswered, it becomes precedent. If you're caught in a lie and show no control over the narrative, your credibility begins to rot. And in the eyes of the ambitious, rotten reputations are an invitation to strike. Machiavelli's era was brutal, but modern life is no different. Think of leaders who lost the public's faith. One scandal, one leak, one moment of weakness, and they crumble. Not because they changed, but because perception changed, and perception always wins. So what does it mean to guard your reputation with paranoia? It means never letting praise make you complacent. It means responding strategically to attacks on your image, not with panic, but with precision. It means curating your circle, managing your message, and understanding that in power, you are always being watched. Use reputation as leverage. Let others believe you're tougher than you are, more capable, less forgiving. Let the myth work for you. But never let it be built on sand. Back it up with enough truth to keep people afraid of finding out what happens when they test it. Remember, you don't need to be invincible. You need to be seen as someone who cannot be taken lightly. In Machiavelli's world, and ours, reputation is not a reflection. It's armor. Guard it like your life depends on it, because it often does. Trust sparingly and verify relentlessly. To Machiavelli, trust wasn't a virtue. It was a vulnerability. In his brutal, clear-eyed view of politics and human nature, blind trust was not just naive, it was dangerous. The moment you put your fate entirely in someone else's hands, you've handed over power, and Machiavelli believed you should never do that. Why? Because people are self-interested. They change. They adapt to new incentives. They promise one thing and deliver another when circumstances shift. It doesn't always come from malice. Sometimes it's fear, ambition, or pure self-preservation. But whatever the motive, the result is the same. Betrayal becomes a real possibility the moment trust goes unchecked. That's why Machiavelli advises, trust sparingly and verify relentlessly. Give no one the full keys to your kingdom without oversight. Smile, shake hands, make alliances, but always leave yourself a way to double-check what you're being told. Power, after all, is not sustained through good faith. It's sustained through constant, active control. In The Prince, Machiavelli highlights this by showing how rulers who trusted too easily, whether advisors, military captains, or even family, often met swift downfalls. He admired those who kept their own counsel, who delegated carefully, and who always monitored those around them. It's not paranoia, it's strategy. Let's apply this to the modern world. Think about your workplace. You may have loyal employees or trusted colleagues, but Machiavelli would ask, have you verified their loyalty under pressure? Do they remain dependable when incentives shift? Or do they whisper, hesitate, and scheme the moment your back is turned? Even in friendships, family, or business deals, trust is only as good as the systems you put in place to back it up. Contracts, audits, monitoring, accountability, these aren't signs of mistrust. They're signs of intelligence. They prevent exploitation. They deter betrayal because they signal, I'm watching. And verification doesn't always have to be overt. Machiavellian wisdom suggests using indirect methods. Ask others, observe behavior over time, test loyalty with small favors or strategic information leaks. See who repeats things they shouldn't. See who vanishes when things get difficult. People reveal their priorities not through words, but through consistent patterns of action. This rule is especially powerful because it speaks to human psychology. We want to trust. It feels good. It's emotionally easier. But leadership isn't about emotional ease. It's about results. Machiavelli's message is not to become cold or cruel. It's to become clear-eyed. Use trust where necessary, but treat it like currency. Don't spend it all in one place. And always, always keep your receipts. People forget the good you do, never the harm. Machiavelli had a chilling grasp of human memory and emotion. He knew that public opinion, loyalty, and even love are fleeting. Do something good, help someone, give generously, defend them, and it will be appreciated for a moment. But hurt someone once, even if it was necessary, and that injury will be remembered forever. This is one of his most psychologically accurate rules. People forget the good you do, but never the harm. Why? Because human beings are wired to notice threats more than comfort. It's a survival instinct. We register pain and betrayal as danger. Kindness feels like a gift, but harm feels like a warning. So, if you're in power, whether a ruler, a boss, or simply a parent, you must understand this principle deeply. 100 acts of generosity can be undone by one harsh decision. A lifetime of service can be erased in the public mind by a single moment of perceived cruelty. It's not fair. It's human nature. Machiavelli didn't use this insight to suggest that you should never be good. He simply warned, don't rely on good deeds to protect your reputation or secure your power. They are too easily forgotten, dismissed, or taken for granted. The good you do becomes an expectation. The harm you do becomes a story that spreads. He advised that when harm must be done, do it quickly, decisively, and all at once. If a ruler needs to purge traitors, break alliances, or enforce harsh measures, he should do it early, clearly, and in a way that leaves no doubt. People may resent it, but they'll move on if it feels like a necessary evil. But if you spread cruelty over time, it festers. It becomes a narrative. It breeds hatred. This also means you must be cautious with discipline. If you fire someone, correct someone harshly, or make an example of someone, be sure it's worth it, because that harm will linger in memory long after your reasons have faded. People will forget why you did it. They'll just remember that you did. In modern leadership, this is especially true. CEOs, politicians, or public figures often pour money into charitable causes, community projects, or employee benefits. and still face backlash over a single mistake. It's not because the public is ungrateful. It's because harm sticks. Once you're perceived as unjust, no amount of good will erase it completely. So how do you use this rule? Be generous, but don't expect loyalty in return. Be kind, but never naive. When you must do harm, do it cleanly, then bury it with overwhelming strength or distraction. And most of all, guard your reputation from unnecessary wounds. Because long after people forget your help, they'll still remember your blade. Appear generous, but never drain your own resources. Machiavelli, ever the realist, understood something that many leaders and people in positions of power forget. True generosity is dangerous when it comes at the expense of sustainability. In The Prince, he makes the case that generosity, while it may win you applause in the short term, can ultimately lead to your financial ruin, resentment from those you can't help, and, most dangerously, the loss of power. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't appear generous. Why? Because people are moved by appearances more than substance. If you seem generous, offering rewards, handouts, favors, or gestures that appear costly, you will win admiration and loyalty. People will believe you care. They will praise your leadership. They'll trust you. But all of this can be achieved without truly bleeding your resources dry. Machiavelli urges us to maintain the image of generosity while remaining incredibly frugal behind the curtain. Let's break this down with a modern lens. Think of a powerful CEO, a politician, or even a community leader. They might fund scholarships, donate to visible causes, or hand out bonuses. But what the public doesn't always see is the calculated nature behind those decisions. The act of giving is often high leverage, a small cost for a major return in reputation. What Machiavelli warns against is the emotional trap of giving too much too often in a way that depletes your foundation. When rulers or leaders drain their treasuries trying to appear generous, they're forced to refill the coffers. And how do they do that? Through taxes, fees, or demanding loyalty through burdensome expectations. The very people who once praised your generosity will now curse your name. In this way, real generosity often turns allies into enemies. This rule also has a deeper psychological layer. The people you help the most are rarely the ones who stay loyal. Ingrates are more common than grateful followers. When you give out of your own pocket, repeatedly, you attract dependents, not supporters. You create a network of expectations, not loyalty. That's a dangerous game, especially for those in positions of leadership. So how do you appear generous without the cost? Simple. Use other people's resources, not your own. Delegate the costs. Find sponsors. Make allies foot the bill. Publicize small acts. Celebrate symbolic gestures. Sometimes all it takes is the story of your generosity, not the action itself, to shape perception. Look at historical examples. Louis XIV of France hosted lavish feasts and built Versailles, but it was funded by heavy taxation and manipulation of the nobility. In contrast, Queen Elizabeth I kept a tight grip on royal expenses but crafted a public image of benevolence and grace. Both were seen as generous monarchs, but only one knew how to sustain the illusion. In the end, generosity is a tool. It must be used strategically, not emotionally. Machiavelli's wisdom lies in separating the effect of generosity, which is perception, from its cost, which is very real. Appear generous, seem kind, but keep your vault sealed. That's how you rule for the long game. A prince must learn to deceive and to be deceived. This rule may sound paradoxical at first. Why would a ruler not only master deception, but also learn to be deceived? But in Machiavelli's cold-blooded world, deception is not a moral failing, it's a survival skill. And understanding how to be deceived doesn't mean enjoying it. It means knowing how deception works when you're on the receiving end, so you can spot it, manage it, or even allow it for your own ends. Let's start with the first half. A prince must learn to deceive. In The Prince, Machiavelli openly admits that truth and honesty are luxuries, rarely afforded to those in power. If you're always honest, you'll eventually be outmaneuvered by someone who isn't. People are not ruled by facts or reason. They are ruled by perception, emotion, and personal interest. If telling the truth serves you, use it. If lying is more useful, lie convincingly. The power of deception lies in the illusion of integrity. Most people don't see the dagger behind the smile. They want to believe what comforts them. So give them the illusion they crave and do what must be done behind the curtain. Appear moral. Appear religious. Appear fair. But never be bound by those appearances. Machiavelli saw virtue as a weapon to be wielded, not followed. This plays out in diplomacy, war, and leadership alike. Consider leaders who promise reforms, peace, or fairness, only to later consolidate power. Machiavelli would not criticize these leaders. He would admire their tactical awareness. Deception, when used intelligently, maintains the ruler's advantage while keeping the population docile and rivals off guard. Now to the second part. Learn to be deceived. Why would a ruler do that? Because understanding deception from the receiving end teaches you where the traps are. It sharpens your instinct. The ruler who has been deceived learns how lies are sold, how manipulation feels, and how false loyalty operates. This is not about being a gullible victim. It's about absorbing the tactics of the con artist so you're never truly fooled again. If you've never been deceived, your understanding of power is naive. There is also a strategic use to allowing yourself to be deceived. When doing so earns you leverage. Sometimes pretending to fall for a lie can draw your enemies out. You let them think they have the upper hand while you're gathering intel, building your countermove, and preparing your strike. This is deception on a deeper level, strategic passivity. Historical figures like Talleyrand, Napoleon's cunning diplomat, mastered this art. He would allow enemies to think he was ignorant or misled, only to turn their confidence into a trap. Even Franklin D. Roosevelt, who led with charm and confidence, often used misdirection in negotiations, letting others believe he was more trusting than he really was. To deceive and to understand deception, this is the twin mastery Machiavelli prescribes. It's about playing the long game with precision, cold logic, and the patience to let truth become a tool, not a virtue. In the game of power, sincerity is the mask. Strategy is the face. Better to be respected through fear than loved through weakness. Respect and love are often confused in leadership, especially by those desperate to be liked. But the reality, Machiavelli tells us, is much harsher. Being loved through weakness is not love at all. It's a temporary convenience. People love a weak leader because he makes them feel safe, indulgent, unchallenged. That love evaporates the moment they sense an opportunity for gain, or perceive you can no longer protect or reward them. Fear, however, rooted in respect, carries weight. It sets boundaries. It commands attention. It forces others to calculate their actions before challenging your authority. Machiavelli's insight here isn't advocating for terror. It's about earned fear, the kind that emerges from consistency, power, and the unmistakable impression that you are not to be trifled with. The leader who is feared but not hated is the one people don't lie to. They don't try to manipulate him. They don't forget his authority, even in his absence. Look at the workplace. A boss who is everyone's friend often struggles with performance, discipline, and accountability. Team members blur lines, take liberties, and resist pressure when it counts most. Why? Because there's no edge. no consequence. That's love rooted in weakness, and it breeds chaos. Now consider the leader whose expectations are clear, whose punishments are rare but firm, and whose presence alone shifts the energy in the room. That's respect, that's fear, that's power. In parenting, it's similar. A parent who always gives in, hoping their child will love them more, ends up being ignored. But a parent who sets firm boundaries, who disciplines not out of anger but resolve, is remembered and respected. The child may not like it in the moment, but in time they understand. This is strength. This is leadership. Machiavelli reminds us that fear isn't about cruelty. It's about clarity. It doesn't mean shouting, bullying, or domination. It means never letting affection from others cloud your judgment. It means making decisions that serve the long game, even if they're unpopular. It means being willing to disappoint others if it means protecting your control. People are fickle. They will adore you when things are easy and turn against you when they're not. But fear, earned through consistency, discipline, and force of will, doesn't vanish with opinion. It remains, and with it your power. Keep friends close, enemies closer, and everyone guessing. This is not just a clever proverb. It's one of Machiavelli's deepest strategic beliefs. True power does not lie in brute strength alone. It lies in information, in control, and most importantly, in keeping your true intentions hidden. Keeping friends close makes sense. You need loyalty, support, people you can rely on. But keeping enemies closer, that's genius. Why? Because distance breeds ignorance, and ignorance breeds fear. But it also breeds surprise attacks. When you let your enemies get too far away, you lose track of them. They plot in silence. They whisper in the shadows. And one day they strike. But when your enemies are close, under your watch, in your meetings, sharing your dinner, you know their temperature. You sense their shifts. You watch their body language. You control what they know. You give them just enough attention to keep them from panicking, but not enough to empower them. You trap them in proximity. And when the time comes, you make the first move. The second part of this rule is just as important. Keep everyone guessing. Predictability is a weakness. If people always know what you're going to do, they can plan around it. They can neutralize your moves before you even make them. But if you're unpredictable, if you pivot when they expect you to double down, if you praise when they expect punishment, if you go silent when they expect fury, you own the board. Consider historical leaders like Napoleon, or in business, Steve Jobs. They didn't let anyone get too comfortable. They built cultures of brilliance, but also tension. Not everyone liked them, but everyone paid attention. Why? Because they were impossible to fully read. That's power. In personal relationships, this rule still applies. You don't have to play games, but you must protect your inner world. Don't reveal every thought. Don't confess every plan. Don't explain every decision. When people can't predict your next move, they hesitate. They second-guess. They respect your mystery. And in that space, you lead. Remember, when you're fully known, you're fully vulnerable. Keep allies close. Keep enemies closer. But always, always keep yourself unpredictable. Use cruelty swiftly and rarely, but make it unforgettable. Cruelty is an ugly word. It makes us uncomfortable. But Machiavelli viewed cruelty not as sadism, but as a strategic tool, one that, when used correctly, can secure peace, establish dominance, and prevent greater suffering down the line. The key, he said, is in the execution. Cruelty must be used swiftly, decisively, without hesitation, and only when necessary. And when it is used, it must matter. It must be so impactful, so final, that it prevents future disobedience or chaos. A strong act of cruelty, delivered once and clearly, is far better than a string of mild punishments that drag on and breed resentment. Why? Because human psychology responds powerfully to clarity. A single dramatic consequence sends a message. A public firing of a corrupt employee. A swift and calculated betrayal of a backstabbing ally. A harsh but just demotion of someone poisoning team morale. These are cruel acts, but they create fear, order, and alignment. Now contrast that with the weak leader who punishes in drips. Passive-aggressive comments, hesitant reprimands, endless chances. This breeds confusion and festering resentment. Worse, it teaches people that boundaries are flexible, rules are negotiable, and leadership is soft. Machiavelli knew that violence delayed is violence multiplied. The more you postpone necessary cruelty, the more painful the final reckoning becomes, for you and for everyone around you. When a difficult decision must be made, make it quickly. When a betrayal must be answered, respond firmly. When a threat arises, don't wait until it grows fangs. Strike fast, strike smart, and move on. Importantly, cruelty should not become a habit. If you're feared for the wrong reasons, if you grow unpredictable, sadistic, or petty, you turn fear into hate. And hate is volatile. It inspires rebellion. But a leader who punishes once and then restores peace becomes a figure of respect, even admiration. A great example is Cesare Borgia, Machiavelli's political idol. When he took power in Romagna, he faced chaos and crime. He installed a brutal enforcer, Ramiro de Orco, to restore order. When the dust settled, Borgia had the man publicly executed, sending a message, "Order is mine, not his." The people feared him, but they also felt safer. His cruelty was fast, rare, and unforgettable. It worked. So when you're in power and you're forced to act with cruelty, don't flinch, don't drag it out, don't apologize. Do it once, do it right, and let the silence that follows be louder than any speech. Because in leadership, justice delayed is respect denied. Never allow others to grow too powerful beside you. In Machiavelli's world, proximity is dangerous. Not just physical closeness, but positional closeness. The more power someone accumulates beside you, the more your authority is threatened. You may think loyalty or friendship shields you, but Machiavelli would scoff at that notion. Power attracts ambition, and ambition rarely stays second place for long. History offers countless lessons. Consider Julius Caesar and Brutus. Their relationship was built on trust and political partnership. But Brutus grew close, too close. His influence among the Senate and the people made him not just an ally, but a potential successor, or a threat. Caesar failed to see that proximity and influence breed temptation, and in the end, Brutus turned. Machiavelli's point is strategic, not paranoid. He's not saying to destroy every talented person around you. Rather, you must regulate the growth of others carefully. If someone's rising star threatens to rival yours, you must act. Either neutralize them through reassignment, limit their access to key decisions, or cut off their alliances before they mature into influence. In The Prince, he warns that powerful ministers should never be allowed to become more loved or feared than the ruler himself. If they do, the ruler loses control of the narrative, the people, and eventually, the state. In modern terms, don't let your COO become the face of the company. Don't let a charismatic deputy mayor become the people's favorite. Don't let a second in command become indispensable. Balance is crucial. A competent second is necessary. You can't rule alone. But their strength must always serve your system, not rival it. The moment they begin to build their own following, shape their own agenda, or speak louder than you, they must be brought back into orbit or cast out of it. Look around any organization and you'll see this in play. A CEO will quietly move ambitious executives to less visible roles. A political leader will rotate cabinet members to prevent any one figure from consolidating power. It's not petty, it's preventative. Because power, like gravity, pulls toward the center. If someone else starts creating their own gravitational field, the center shifts. This rule also applies to advisors and right hands. Be cautious of the one who whispers into everyone's ears, including yours. If their words carry more weight than your orders, they've grown too powerful, and when such figures fall, they often take reputations, secrets, and networks with them. So you must constantly assess the ecosystem around you. Is anyone building influence parallel to yours? Are they gathering loyalists? Are they being praised more than you? These are not small details. They are early warning signs. Machiavelli would tell you, cut off their ascent before they start to climb too high. Because once they reach your level, the next logical step is to surpass you. And in the world of power, two suns cannot shine in the same sky for long. Power is taken, not given. At the heart of every power structure is a brutal truth. No one gives you power out of kindness. They give you a role, a task, a label. But power, real power, that is taken. Machiavelli knew that authority is not granted, it's seized. The illusion of a promotion, a title, or a vote of confidence often masks a deeper reality. You're only as powerful as what you command, not what you're handed. People may nod, they may smile, they may say, "You're in charge now," but unless you move decisively to act like you're in charge, you aren't. You're just renting authority from the people who still really have it. Power is action, it's influence, it's control, and it almost always comes through bold strategic moves, not polite requests. Whether it's a boardroom coup, a political maneuver, or a social takeover, power flows toward the person who dares to claim it. Consider the rise of Napoleon. He wasn't born into a throne. He took it. Through strategic brilliance, propaganda, and fearless decision-making, he went from general to emperor. When the French Republic hesitated, he seized the moment. History doesn't remember the passive, it remembers the audacious. This rule is crucial in modern life too. In business, waiting for someone to recognize your value is a losing strategy. The executive who climbs the ladder fastest isn't necessarily the most talented. It's often the one who positions themselves best, who takes credit, who speaks loudly, who creates opportunities, not waits for them. Even in relationships and family systems, power dynamics exist. The person who sets the emotional tone, who drives the decisions, who commands attention, they have power. Not necessarily because someone handed it to them, but because they claimed it. Now, Machiavelli would caution, seizing power doesn't mean being reckless or loud. It means being calculated. You don't rush into the throne room and demand a crown. You earn trust, gather leverage, study weaknesses, and strike when the structure is soft. Timing is everything. When everyone else is hesitating, you must move. But beware, if you expect others to give you power, you'll wait forever. Institutions protect themselves. People fear losing what they have. They'll give you praise, applause, even responsibility, but not true control. That you must take. And once you take it, you must keep it. Because power taken is always power challenged. Someone is always watching, waiting to take it back. So your grip must stay firm. Your vision must stay sharp. And your ambition must never grow soft. In Machiavelli's world, and ours, power belongs to those who reach for it without asking for permission. Never build someone else's power structure. To build is to invest. And in politics, business, or even friendships, building someone else's power structure means giving away your energy, resources, and loyalty, only to watch them climb while you remain a servant to their ambition. Machiavelli's warning here is clear. Don't be the architect of someone else's empire, because when it's complete, you may be the first piece they discard. This rule cuts deep, especially for those who pride themselves on being team players or loyal lieutenants. But Machiavelli isn't romantic about loyalty. He sees it for what it often becomes, a trap. When you help someone rise and you're not positioned to share in that power, you become disposable. You're not seen as a partner. You're seen as a stepping stone. Think about it. How many skilled advisors, campaign managers, or corporate number twos have helped build empires, only to be pushed aside when the vision was realized? They were essential during the ascent, but inconvenient once the spotlight came. Their usefulness made them powerful, but that power wasn't theirs. It belonged to the person they helped. Machiavelli admired competence, but he feared dependency. When you build someone else's structure, whether that's a movement, a business, a kingdom, you're placing your future in their hands. Your fate becomes tied to their choices, their moods, their perception of your loyalty. That's not power. That's servitude disguised as ambition. So what's the solution? It's not total isolation. It's strategic alliance. You can support others, but never without building your own foundation in parallel. If you're helping a CEO build a company, make sure your name, influence, and stake are secured. If you're supporting a politician, build your own network while you serve theirs. If you're in a group project, make sure your role is visible and unreplaceable. Machiavelli would tell you to plant your own flag, even while you help carry someone else's. Because if the day comes when you're no longer useful to their vision, your own structure will still stand. It's a rule of survival and self-respect. Don't be the loyal craftsman who builds the castle only to be banished from its gates. Be the one who designs your own fortress, even as you lend a hand, because in the end, power respects independence. And if you want a legacy, you must be the architect of your own story. Machiavelli didn't believe in noble sacrifice for someone else's dream. He believed in sovereignty. Build your own, or be forgotten in someone else's. Eliminate threats before they mature. One of Machiavelli's most cold-blooded yet enduringly strategic insights is this: never wait for a threat to become dangerous. Kill it while it's still crawling. Whether in politics, leadership, or war, the greatest mistake a ruler can make is to underestimate a minor problem until it becomes an uncontrollable enemy. In The Prince, Machiavelli compares political diseases to physical ones, easier to cure in the early stages but harder to diagnose. By the time the illness is obvious, it's often too late. So it is with betrayal, rebellion, and disloyalty. If you wait until the knife is already halfway into your back, you've waited too long. This rule demands foresight. It's not about reacting, it's about anticipating. The master of power learns to read patterns. A subordinate who is growing too ambitious, a noble whose popularity is rising too quickly, an ally who is asking too many pointed questions. These are not coincidences. They are early signs of divergence from loyalty, and left alone, they grow into existential threats. History is littered with leaders who failed to act until it was too late. Julius Caesar ignored the whispers around Brutus and paid with his life. Monarchs who allowed rival factions to fester often ended up overthrown. CEOs who allowed minor dissent to take root saw their boards flip against them. Delay is not mercy. It's a gamble with terrible odds. To eliminate a threat early is not necessarily to destroy it physically. It may mean removing someone from a position of influence, discrediting their name, isolating them socially or politically, or buying their loyalty before their betrayal can take form. The key is timing. Once the threat is full-grown, it requires a full war. Catch it early, and it only takes a whisper and a quiet dismissal. Now, this strategy often makes people uncomfortable. It seems paranoid, maybe even ruthless. But Machiavelli would remind you, power is not kept by kindness. It is kept by calculation. When the stakes are high, when your livelihood, influence, or survival is on the line, waiting to be sure is often an excuse for inaction. Of course, this approach requires discipline. You must learn to tell the difference between a genuine threat and mere annoyance. Acting too aggressively against harmless individuals will isolate you. But waiting too long on the wrong individual, that can destroy you. So ask yourself constantly, who's gaining too much power? Who has too much loyalty from others? Who could wound you if they ever turned? The answer to those questions tells you where to act. In Machiavellian thinking, mercy is a reward, not a default. And while it may sound cruel, eliminating a threat before it matures is not just about protecting yourself. It often prevents a larger, bloodier conflict down the line. Like a surgeon cutting away a cancer before it spreads, swift action against a rising threat is not cruelty, it's leadership. Use religion as a tool, not a guide. Niccolo Machiavelli was raised in a deeply religious world, yet he was one of the first to strip away its divine illusions when discussing power. To him, religion was not a personal compass, it was a political instrument, and he advised rulers to treat it that way, use it as a tool, not a guide. What does that mean? It means that while faith may inspire men, it is belief that moves nations, and belief can be shaped. Religion, when wielded strategically, offers rulers a powerful mechanism to unify people, justify actions, and legitimize authority. But when followed blindly, it can lead rulers into traps of self-sacrifice, indecision, or moral paralysis. Machiavelli observed that the most effective leaders in history weren't necessarily saints. They were masters of appearances. They knew that the public longed for moral structure, for divine purpose, for something higher than politics. A wise ruler, he argued, does not need to believe in religious doctrine, but he must know how to manipulate its symbols to his advantage. In Renaissance Italy, religion was everywhere. In the architecture, the language, the law, the fear of hell. But Machiavelli saw past the grandeur. He noticed how the church often used fear to consolidate power, how religious festivals could serve as distractions during unrest, and how divine authority could be claimed by men to do very earthly things, like conquer, imprison, or kill. To use religion as a tool means crafting an image of righteousness. It means invoking the divine to back your policies, even if your decisions are made in cold strategy. It means appearing as a servant of higher principles while pursuing pragmatic goals. Machiavelli did not preach atheism. Instead, he exposed the machinery behind belief. He warned rulers not to let religious ethics handcuff their decisions. In war, a prayer may rally troops, but steel wins battles. In politics, quoting scripture might pacify the crowd, but controlling resources and alliances secures the throne. Consider modern parallels. Politicians invoking religious values to gain votes while operating in ruthless political systems. Leaders swearing oaths on sacred texts while engaging in high-stakes diplomacy, surveillance, or warfare. Whether it's ancient Florence or the modern West, Machiavelli's point remains. Religion often serves power more than it challenges it. So don't reject religion outright. Use it wisely. Present yourself as a moral leader. Speak to the crowd's sense of divine order. But behind closed doors, make your decisions based on reality, not scripture. Because the heavens may offer comfort, but strategy brings survival. Great men shape their times. Cowards are shaped by them. This is one of Machiavelli's most defiant truths. In a world constantly shifting, economies collapsing, regimes rising and falling, technologies upending societies, there are two kinds of people: those who shape the chaos and those who cower beneath it. The former become legends. The latter become forgotten. To Machiavelli, greatness is not found in fortune alone. It's found in those rare individuals who seize their moment and bend the course of history to their will. These are not just men of action. They are men of courage, of audacity, of ruthless clarity. They don't wait for conditions to improve. They act as if the world were waiting for them. This rule speaks to agency. Too many people drift through life, reacting instead of commanding. They adjust to trends. They follow the rules. They cope. But those who shape their times, like Cesare Borgia, one of Machiavelli's prime examples, see rules as negotiable and trends as opportunities to disrupt. The coward, by contrast, makes excuses. He blames bad timing. He shrinks from conflict. He worries more about opinion than outcome. And in doing so, he becomes a passenger in his own life, blown about by the winds of fate. Cowards are always waiting for the right conditions, for permission, for certainty. But by the time they act, the moment is gone, and history has already been written by someone else. To shape your time requires risk. You must act when others hesitate, speak when others are silent, move when others freeze. It requires failure, too, because not every bold move pays off. But Machiavelli believed that the worst failure was inaction, that to live timidly is worse than to die boldly. This isn't just about grand leaders. It's about you. In business, do you play it safe while others innovate? In relationships, do you suppress your truth for comfort? In your daily life, do you drift with the current or do you aim to steer? Shaping your time means living with purpose. It means being uncomfortable. It means being willing to be hated, doubted, even feared, because you're trying to do something bigger than yourself. History remembers those who moved the world, not those who waited for it to move them. So ask yourself, when the moment comes, will you rise to meet it, or will you be molded by it, quietly, invisibly, like so many others before you? Machiavelli's challenge is clear. Be the force that defines your era, not the product of it. Make bold moves. While others hesitate, hesitation is the silent killer of power. Machiavelli understood that the world does not wait for the cautious or the indecisive. In times of crisis, confusion, or opportunity, those who hesitate are left behind, trampled by the swift, forgotten by the masses, and overtaken by those bold enough to seize the moment. In The Prince, Machiavelli constantly emphasized the importance of decisive, bold action, especially when others are frozen in doubt. Boldness doesn't mean recklessness. It means the ability to move forward when uncertainty reigns. Most people need clarity, certainty, and comfort to act. But by the time all the information is clear, the opportunity is gone. The bold act before the fog lifts. They trust their preparation, read the landscape, and move while others are still thinking. The value of boldness becomes even more powerful when seen in contrast. Imagine a room full of leaders, executives, or political figures caught in a moment of indecision. No one wants to move first. They're afraid of backlash, risk, or responsibility. Then one person makes a strong, confident choice. Even if it's imperfect, that act alone elevates their status. People follow boldness because it signals strength, clarity, and leadership. The one who moves first defines the field. This is why boldness has a psychological impact. It projects certainty in a world that craves it. Machiavelli knew that perception shapes reality. When you act boldly, you appear in control. That appearance becomes truth in the minds of followers, allies, and even enemies. Boldness also disrupts. It throws off opponents who expect hesitation. While they're planning counter moves, your decision has already reshaped the game. Whether it's claiming a city, firing a disloyal advisor, or launching a risky strategy. Bold moves force others to react on your timeline, not theirs. But here's the key. Boldness must be supported by readiness. Acting boldly without preparation is suicide. Machiavelli admired bold figures like Cesare Borgia, not just for their courage, but for their timing. They waited for hesitation in others, and then acted like lightning. This principle applies outside of politics, too. In business, bold leaders redefine markets. In negotiations, boldness can break stalemates. In life, bold choices move us forward while others wait for signs. Machiavelli would say, if you see hesitation around you, that is your green light. Move. Don't wait to be sure. Be ready, be observant, and then act. In the moment of universal hesitation, even a flawed decision can establish dominance. The timid lose ground every second they wait. The bold carve their names into history. Loyalty, bought with rewards, disappears with poverty. Machiavelli understood a dangerous truth about human nature. Loyalty that is purchased is never permanent. When you buy allegiance through money, rewards, or flattery, it lasts only as long as the benefits do. When the well runs dry, so does the devotion. In The Prince, he warns against relying on loyalty that is earned only through generosity. People who are drawn to you by wealth, status, or advantage are not loyal to you. They are loyal to their interests. And interests shift. The moment those rewards fade, through financial hardship, a political setback, or loss of influence, they will scatter, turn, or align with someone else offering a better deal. This is a brutal but clear insight. Many leaders believe that generosity guarantees loyalty. They think if they reward others enough, pay them well, promote them quickly, support them lavishly, they will be safe. But Machiavelli points out, people remember gifts only while they're receiving them. Once the gifts stop, so does their gratitude. The deeper problem? Reward-based loyalty breeds entitlement. The more you give, the more they expect. What once looked like generosity starts to feel like a baseline. Eventually, the rewards become a trap for both the giver and the receiver. You're no longer earning loyalty, you're renting it at an ever-increasing cost. In contrast, Machiavelli valued loyalty born from shared risk, aligned ambition, or mutual necessity. These bonds are harder to forge, but far more stable. A man who stands by you when there's nothing to gain is the one who may stand by you when everything is at stake. These are allies made through trust, fear, and strategic alignment, not payment. This lesson is seen in war, business, and family empires. How many times have companies watched their top employees jump ship the moment a better offer appeared? How many leaders have been betrayed by those they once enriched? The truth is, unless people see your power and your vision as critical to their own survival or success, they will not stick around when your fortune fades. Thus, Machiavelli's warning is not against reward altogether. He was pragmatic. He knew incentives have a role, but he cautioned leaders never to confuse incentive with true loyalty. Always ask, would this person still support me if the rewards stop tomorrow? If the answer is no, don't trust them with critical tasks. Keep them close, only as long as they're useful, and always have replacements ready. Build loyalty through fear, respect, or shared blood if you must, but never rely solely on coins. Because when the gold is gone, so are the followers. Surround yourself with useful men, not honest ones. Honesty is overrated in politics. That's the cold essence of this rule. To Machiavelli, a man who is honest but useless is a liability. a sentimental ornament in a brutal game. In contrast, a man who may lie, manipulate, or even betray others but gets results is an asset. Usefulness beats honesty every time. This isn't to say Machiavelli advocated surrounding yourself with criminals or scoundrels. Rather, he understood that morality is subjective, and that leadership often requires navigating murky ethical waters. What he warned against was the fatal mistake of promoting or trusting someone just because they are good. Good men often lack the stomach to do what power requires. A prince or any leader must accomplish things. He must protect his state, defeat rivals, execute orders, and preserve power. If the people around him are kind but ineffective, he is vulnerable. If they are honorable but weak, he will fall. Loyalty without competence is dead weight. Integrity without ability solves nothing. In The Prince, Machiavelli praises advisors who speak their mind, who tell the truth when asked, but who also understand the game. He admired men who were sharp, strategic, and adaptable, not blind idealists, not moral purists. He knew that in moments of crisis, what matters is not how honest your men are, it's whether they can deliver. And here's the dark irony. Honest men, when faced with ethical dilemmas, often freeze. They hesitate, debate, or walk away. Useful men find a way through. They bend rules, exploit gaps, and solve problems with brutal efficiency. If you want to win, you need those men beside you. This applies today just as it did in Renaissance Italy, in politics, corporations, and military units. Effective leaders are often surrounded not by saints, but by sharks, men and women who know how to move quietly, act fast, and solve problems without asking permission. They're not chosen for purity. They're chosen for precision. This doesn't mean ethics are meaningless, but it means ethics alone cannot rule. Machiavelli would say, you can be moral in private. In public, be effective. Surround yourself with those who can build, protect, and enforce your vision, even if their methods make you uncomfortable. The ultimate point? Don't confuse honesty with loyalty or morality with competence. Measure your allies not by how good they seem, but by what they do when the stakes are high. Those who are useful will keep you alive. Those who are merely honest will die with their hands clean and leave you holding the knife. Fear creates order. Love creates expectations. Machiavelli's distinction between fear and love is not just a cold preference for cruelty. It's a deep insight into how human relationships function, especially when power is involved. In The Prince, he famously declares that while it is ideal to be both feared and loved, it is far safer to be feared if you must choose only one. This isn't because fear is morally superior. It's because fear produces order, while love often produces demands. Let's unpack that. When people love you, they feel comfortable. They trust you. They see you as familiar. And while that might seem positive, it breeds expectation. People begin to feel entitled to your time, your favors, your resources. They believe they have the right to critique or even influence your decisions. In other words, love often becomes a burden to those in power. Now contrast that with fear. When people fear you, not irrational terror, but controlled respect with consequences, they stay in line. They don't ask for more than they need. They don't challenge your authority. They understand boundaries, and more importantly, they don't test them. Fear simplifies the relationship between ruler and subject, leader and follower, boss and employee. There is clarity. There is obedience. Fear, Machiavelli argues, produces stability. And in leadership, stability is the soil in which all achievement grows. A fearful population is not always unhappy. They may even be more secure under strong, decisive rule. But they won't revolt, they won't plot, and they certainly won't take your power for granted. Love, on the other hand, is fragile. People love you for what you've done for them lately. The moment you stop giving, the affection fades. People may turn on you faster if they feel betrayed by a loved leader because their expectations were higher to begin with. And once disappointed, their anger is not just political. It's personal. Think of leaders in the modern world. The beloved ones often end up torn down because they couldn't live up to the idealized image others had built around them. The feared ones, those who governed with strength, sometimes even ruthlessness, are often remembered as strong, even if controversial. This rule doesn't mean you should be cruel or abusive. Fear is not about sadism. It's about respect based on the awareness of consequences. It means people know that crossing you has a price. That rules are real. That power is enforced. And from that foundation, peace and progress are built. So Machiavelli urges us to lead with clarity. Don't let your need to be loved weaken your ability to command. Because love fades with disappointment, but fear, if balanced and justly applied, creates a durable order. And order is the oxygen of power. Don't seek to be good, seek to be effective. One of Machiavelli's most controversial and liberating teachings is this: being good is not the same as being successful. In fact, many people who cling to goodness, honesty, fairness, humility, end up exploited, discarded, or forgotten. Why? Because the world does not reward goodness. It rewards results. And Machiavelli understood this with ruthless clarity. To seek to be good in the moral or religious sense often means following rules that others will gladly break. It means turning the other cheek while someone else slaps you again. It means missing opportunities because you're waiting for a just solution. In contrast, seeking to be effective means asking a different question altogether. What works? What will achieve the outcome you want, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it bends the rules, even if it challenges your self-image? Machiavelli's world is one where results define morality. If a lie saves your people, is it truly immoral? If a ruthless decision prevents civil war, does it make you evil or wise? Machiavelli flips traditional thinking on its head. He challenges us to stop asking, "Is this right?" and start asking, "Will this work?" Consider the people in your life who are admired or in control. Are they always the kindest, the most truthful, the most selfless? Probably not. More often they are effective. They know how to maneuver people, seize moments, make hard decisions. They might not follow the rules, but they write their own. And because they are effective, people follow them, not out of admiration, but out of necessity. This doesn't mean abandoning all ethics, but it means choosing your values strategically, not blindly. You don't win by refusing to play the game. You win by mastering it. Sometimes that means keeping your word. Other times, it means breaking it to protect the greater mission. Machiavelli would argue that morality must serve power, not the other way around. Real effectiveness means learning from outcomes, not ideals. If kindness gets results, use it. If manipulation gets results, use that instead. The world doesn't reward intentions. It rewards impact. In politics, war, and leadership, the noble loser is still a loser. The cold, strategic winner writes the history books. So don't wear goodness like a badge. Wear effectiveness like armor. Ask yourself not, "What's the right thing to do?" but "What gets me closer to control, success, and longevity?" That's the Machiavellian path. Not clean, not sentimental, but undeniably powerful. When in doubt, act decisively. Hesitation is the slow death of power. In the world Machiavelli describes, indecision invites enemies, breeds confusion, and dissolves authority. While careful planning is important, there comes a moment when doubt must give way to bold, unflinching action, even if all the facts aren't clear. Because the illusion of certainty is often more powerful than certainty itself. When a ruler or leader wavers, their enemies grow bold, subordinates grow impatient. Allies lose confidence. Doubt doesn't remain private, it spreads. It infects the perception of your strength. And once people start questioning your decisiveness, they start questioning your ability to lead. Power doesn't tolerate uncertainty for long. That's why Machiavelli argues that even a bad decision made boldly can be more effective than a good decision made too late. Action gives you momentum. It establishes dominance. It creates consequences that others must react to. In contrast, inaction leaves you at the mercy of events and the designs of others. In The Prince, Machiavelli praises leaders who act boldly in the face of uncertainty. He saw fortune, what we might call luck, as a violent river that sweeps away the hesitant but respects those who build dams and dig channels. Fortune favors the prepared and the daring, not the cautious and contemplative. This applies everywhere: war, business, politics, even personal relationships. If you're unsure how someone feels about you, address it directly. If you're unsure whether to pursue an opportunity, take the first step. Even if you stumble, you'll have made your move, and others will adjust to your initiative. Control is taken, not granted, and the decisive leader takes it before the uncertain one can even finish thinking. Decisive action also has psychological power. It creates the image of strength, competence, and clarity, even if you're improvising behind the scenes. People don't follow perfect leaders. They follow leaders who look like they know what they're doing. Confidence is persuasive. Boldness is magnetic. Action in the face of doubt is leadership incarnate. That doesn't mean you act recklessly. It means you don't let uncertainty paralyze you. You gather what you can, trust your instincts, then move forward and own the consequences. Because even mistakes, when handled boldly, can be reframed. But passivity is always punished. To rule, to influence, to survive in Machiavelli's world, you must be the one creating the ripples, not watching them. So, when in doubt, strike, move, decide. The world doesn't wait for the hesitant, and power never belongs to the cautious. Reward loyalty publicly, punish betrayal brutally. Few things shape power dynamics more than how a leader handles loyalty and betrayal. Machiavelli, who dissected the mechanics of ruling with surgical precision, believed deeply in the importance of rewarding allegiance and crushing disloyalty, but not quietly. Public visibility, he insisted, is the key. When someone stands by you, especially when they have every reason not to, that act is golden. It's a currency of trust and strength, and when you reward it publicly, you send a signal to everyone watching. This is what happens when you are loyal to me. That doesn't just reinforce the bond with the loyal party. It sets a cultural expectation. It tells others that loyalty is noticed, valued, and most importantly, rewarded. Public rewards don't always mean money or promotion, though those are powerful tools. It could be praise in front of peers, access to your inner circle, special responsibilities, or elevation in title. The important part is the visibility. People need to see that loyalty pays off, or they won't risk showing it. In a world filled with self-interest, quiet rewards are invisible incentives, and invisible incentives are no incentives at all. Now, flip that around. What do you do when someone betrays you? Here is where Machiavelli gets truly cold-blooded. Betrayal is not just a personal insult. It's an existential threat. It's a signal to others that treachery might go unpunished. And in a hierarchy, that's like dropping blood in the water. It attracts sharks. That's why betrayal must be punished, brutally and visibly. No behind-the-scenes dismissals, no polite distance. When someone undermines your leadership, lies to you, steals your power, or poisons your team from within, they must be made into an example. This is not about vengeance. It's about deterrence. It's about controlling the narrative and reestablishing fear. Think of great generals, CEOs, and rulers throughout history. The most effective ones didn't punish betrayal with quiet exile. They stripped titles, cut privileges, and cast out traitors before their loyal ranks. Even in the modern world, the equivalent might be firing someone with a clear explanation of breach and disloyalty, so no one else misreads it as random. The psychological effect is profound. People are more afraid of what they see than what they hear rumors about. One well-publicized act of consequence prevents a dozen behind-the-scenes rebellions. It keeps your team aligned and your enemies hesitant. The balance here is critical. Too much brutality and you become a tyrant. Too little and you look weak. But when you reward loyalty openly and punish betrayal decisively, you reinforce the two pillars of power, trust and fear. One pulls people toward you, the other keeps them from turning against you. Appear stable, even when you're on fire. Power is not just about what you do, it's about what others perceive. And one of the most powerful illusions a leader can master is the appearance of stability. Machiavelli, though writing in the 16th century, understood a timeless truth. The image of calm control can often be more important than actual control. When a leader looks rattled, uncertain, or panicked, people begin to question. They ask, does he really know what he's doing? That one crack can spread like wildfire through a team, a company, a court, a country. Doubt is contagious. It erodes confidence. And once it sets in, even the most capable leader finds it hard to regain footing. Now, let's be real. There will be moments when everything is on fire. The finances are in chaos. The board is furious. The public is turning against you. Your team is falling apart. But in those moments, the worst thing you can do is show panic. Why? Because people don't just look to leaders for solutions. They look to them for emotional direction. If you collapse, they collapse. That's why appearance is crucial. You must project steadiness even when you're improvising. You must speak clearly when your mind is racing. You must move decisively when you're filled with doubt. This doesn't mean lying. It means composure. The calm in your voice becomes a lifeline. The confidence in your body language becomes the rallying point. The steadiness in your eyes becomes reassurance. There is a phrase in military leadership, calm is contagious. The best generals never scream orders in battle. They speak firmly, clearly, and with presence, because their troops take emotional cues from their demeanor. The same is true in business, politics, and family leadership. Machiavelli would argue that the appearance of control can buy you time to actually gain control. People won't revolt as long as they think the captain knows the course. But the moment they sense you're lost, they start jumping ship. This rule also protects you against predators. Wolves don't attack a lion who looks ready. They attack the limping one. When you appear stable, even in chaos, you don't invite attacks. Rivals hesitate. Critics hold back. And allies stay in formation. The challenge is internal discipline. You must control your own fears before you can manage the fears of others. That means preparing mentally for crisis long before it hits. It means practicing restraint, emotional regulation, and the art of performance. Because yes, leadership is a performance. And the greatest leaders are those who keep the mask steady while their world reshapes behind the curtain. Stability is not the absence of fire. It's the ability to make others believe you can walk through it untouched. The ends justify the means, but only if you win. This is perhaps the most infamous idea tied to Machiavelli, and it's also the most misunderstood. When people hear the ends justify the means, they imagine ruthless dictators, backroom deals, betrayal, and cruelty, all painted over with the excuse of some higher goal. But Machiavelli never said this phrase directly. Still, its meaning flows through the prince like an underground current. Results are what matter, not intentions, not appearances, not even morality. But here's the part most people miss. The ends only justify the means if you win. If you fail, if your plan collapses, if your goal isn't achieved, then your methods, no matter how brutal or brilliant, become crimes, not strategy. History remembers outcomes, not attempts. Imagine a ruler who lies, manipulates, and kills to stay in power, but loses it all in the end. They're not seen as cunning, they're condemned as corrupt. On the other hand, a ruler who uses similar methods but succeeds in building a lasting empire, bringing order, or defeating enemies is remembered as a strong leader. Machiavelli understood this distinction. He wasn't telling leaders to do whatever they wanted. He was warning them that whatever they do must work, because power, at its core, is performance-based. You don't get credit for trying. You get credit for winning. When you succeed, people tend to forget, forgive, or even romanticize your tactics. They admire strength, especially if that strength brings stability, wealth, or victory. They rationalize the cruelty. They call it necessary. They tell themselves, he did what had to be done. That's why Machiavelli advised rulers to be prepared to act immorally, but wisely. If a ruler breaks promises, uses deception, or employs violence, it must be done with purpose and precision, not recklessly, and not out of impulse. Every action must serve a clear end, and that end must be achieved. Modern examples echo this everywhere. A corporate leader who slashes departments, breaks unions, and restructures aggressively may be hated until the company's stock price triples and investors hail them as a visionary. A political leader who uses dirty tactics to win an election may be condemned until their reforms reduce crime, increase jobs, or unify a fractured nation. Success rewrites the story. Failure locks the methods in infamy. So if you embrace Machiavelli's rule, you're accepting a higher burden. Not only must your actions be effective, they must lead to visible, defensible success. Because once the dust settles, people will only ask one question. Did it work? If the answer is yes, you may be seen as wise. If the answer is no, you'll be seen as a villain who gambled with honor and lost. Use every tool. Consider every tactic. But remember, the ends only justify the means if you win. A leader must be willing to do evil when good won't suffice. Machiavelli's genius was in his honesty. He didn't pretend the world was fair. He didn't preach that leaders should always be good, honest, or noble. Instead, he recognized something that many people don't want to hear. Sometimes doing good isn't enough to survive. And when that moment comes, a true leader must be prepared to do what is necessary, even if it's evil. In The Prince, Machiavelli makes it clear that the path to power and stability is often lined with moral compromise. He admired leaders like Cesare Borgia, who were willing to be cruel, deceptive, and calculating, but only when it served a greater goal. This isn't a license for chaos. It's a demand for clarity. If goodness leads to weakness, then goodness becomes a liability. This rule challenges one of the most comforting myths of leadership, that integrity alone is enough. That if you tell the truth, follow the rules, and treat people fairly, you will be respected and succeed. But history tells a different story. Many well-intentioned leaders have been crushed because they refused to get their hands dirty when the situation demanded it. They tried to lead with clean ideals in a dirty world. The truth is, leadership is a battlefield, and battlefields are messy. You'll face enemies who lie, cheat, and manipulate. You'll face crises where delaying action means people suffer. You'll be forced to choose between two wrongs, and in those moments, a good leader hesitates. A strong leader acts. Machiavelli's point is not to encourage evil, it's to allow it when necessary. Suppose punishing a few disloyal generals will save a nation from civil war, or deceiving a rival diplomat will prevent thousands of lives lost in a siege, or silencing a rebellion early prevents a decade of unrest. In each case, the evil choice might preserve a greater good. This is why Machiavelli viewed cruelty as a tool, not a flaw. The key, he said, is to be measured in its use. A leader who commits evil with no reason or restraint becomes a tyrant. But one who uses it sparingly, with focus and resolve, becomes feared, and fear, when used well, brings order. In the modern world, this rule still applies. Leaders must sometimes fire loyal employees to save a company. Presidents may approve military strikes that cause loss but prevent larger wars. Parents might lie to protect their children from painful truths. These are not acts of malice, they're acts of necessity. To lead is to carry weight others can't, and that weight includes the burden of doing things others won't understand or forgive. That's why leadership is lonely. That's why Machiavelli said a prince must be willing to learn how not to be good, because when goodness fails, and it will, you must be willing to step into the dark, not because you want to, but because you must. The appearance of justice is often more valuable than justice itself. Machiavelli understood something that few rulers like to admit, yet most instinctively practice. Perception matters more than reality, especially when it comes to justice. In The Prince, he stresses that a ruler does not need to be just. He only needs to appear just. This idea is unsettling to some, but to those who truly understand power, it's essential. People crave order. They want to believe that the world is fair, that leaders make decisions based on right and wrong, and that justice prevails. But the truth is more complicated. Real justice, fair, unbiased, perfectly measured, is often slow, difficult, and politically costly. Meanwhile, the appearance of justice can achieve the same calming effect on the public without the delays or complications. Why is this so powerful? Because people don't witness the machinery behind your decisions. They see outcomes. They see performances. If a ruler punishes a wrongdoer publicly and speaks the language of fairness, the public rarely questions the deeper motives behind the punishment. Whether it was politically convenient, strategically timed, or even falsely justified doesn't matter, as long as it looks just. This is why Machiavelli advised princes to maintain the outward appearance of morality, fairness, and righteousness, even if, behind the scenes, their decisions were dictated by pure expediency. The illusion of justice is often more effective at maintaining order than real justice ever could be. Let's say a powerful advisor betrays you. The actual just process would involve careful investigation, due process, hearings, and time. But all of that opens the door for doubt, sympathy, and rebellion. Instead, a swift and public execution with a clear moral rationale can restore authority in a single stroke. Even if the true motive is self-preservation, the appearance of justice quells unrest. Modern governments, corporations, and even media operate by this same logic. When scandals emerge, it's not always about fixing the underlying issue. It's about managing optics. Leaders offer apologies, launch inquiries, or fire a scapegoat, not necessarily to right a wrong, but to create the illusion that justice has been served. This doesn't mean justice has no value. But when it comes to power, it's the belief in justice that maintains control. People will endure hardship, accept punishment, and follow orders if they believe they're part of a just system. The moment they suspect it's rigged, or worse, arbitrary, they revolt. So how do you apply this rule? Always protect your image as a fair and principled leader. Make decisions that look balanced, even when they're calculated. When you punish, explain your reasoning in moral terms. When you reward, frame it as merit-based. Build the theater of justice, even if the script is written with strategy. In the end, justice, real justice, is noble. But in Machiavelli's world, power belongs to those who control the illusion of justice, because perception shapes loyalty, fear, and obedience far more effectively than truth. Never let comfort dull your ambition. One of the most dangerous threats to any powerful man isn't war, betrayal, or politics. It's comfort. Comfort seduces you into complacency. It whispers that you've done enough. It tempts you to rest when you should be preparing. It tells you to protect what you have instead of risking it for something greater. Machiavelli would call this not just a mistake, but a death sentence for ambition. In The Prince, Machiavelli constantly emphasizes the importance of adaptability and momentum. Leaders rise because they act, they dominate because they move, and they stay in power because they never lose their hunger. The moment you stop pushing forward, you begin to slide backward, because the world does not stop turning just because you're satisfied. Comfort is the slow rot of the ambitious. You achieve some success, a good title, wealth, influence, and suddenly your urgency fades. You start avoiding risks. You stop questioning your position. You start managing your power rather than expanding it. And while you sit still, someone else, hungrier, sharper, more ruthless, is moving up the ladder. This is why Machiavellian thought encourages a constant state of motion. Not reckless movement, but purposeful momentum. You should always be seeking the next advantage, preparing for the next threat, outthinking the next competitor. Even in times of peace, train for war. Even in times of praise, prepare for criticism. Historical rulers who allowed comfort to dull their ambition often paid dearly. Kings who stopped conquering were soon invaded. Business moguls who rested on past achievements were outpaced by younger innovators. Nations that grew wealthy and complacent became breeding grounds for internal decay and external attack. Comfort also weakens discipline. You start to lose the sharpness of your judgment. You tolerate behaviors you once would have punished. You begin justifying delays, ignoring red flags, or relying too much on advisors to think for you. All of this erodes your edge, the very thing that got you power in the first place. But this isn't about living in misery or paranoia. Machiavelli isn't saying that success should be joyless. He's saying that ambition is a fire and comfort is water. You must protect that fire. Feed it with vision, with strategy, with calculated risk. Never let it die out in the warmth of temporary success. How do you keep ambition alive? Set higher standards. Surround yourself with sharp, ambitious minds who challenge you. Never be the smartest person in the room. Study your rivals. Seek discomfort. Take on missions that stretch you. And above all, remember that yesterday's victories mean nothing today. Machiavelli teaches us that power is not static. It's a force that must be renewed. And if comfort ever convinces you that you've made it, you've already begun to lose it. Because in the world of real power, ambition is not a phase. It's your lifeblood. Let it dull, and you don't just stop growing, you start dying. Assume everyone has a price, and find it. Machiavelli believed that no one is incorruptible. Everyone, no matter how loyal, virtuous, or noble they may appear, has a price. That price might be money, influence, revenge, safety, or even ego. But the point is clear. Everyone can be moved if you're smart enough to find the lever. To Machiavelli, this wasn't a cynical view. It was realism. It was the recognition that people act in their own interest, and that even the most loyal man can turn if the stakes are high enough. The art of power, then, is to identify what motivates each individual and use that motivation to your advantage. This principle is especially powerful because it forces a leader to become a reader of character. You can't treat all men the same. One may hunger for gold, another for respect, a third for vengeance. A fourth may crave recognition above all else. The key is observation. Listen more than you speak. Watch how they react to praise, pressure, or promises. The better you understand what drives them, the easier it becomes to bend them. Machiavelli would argue that you should never trust loyalty that hasn't been tested. And how do you test it? You probe, you tempt. You see how far someone will go. You offer them something they've always wanted and watch how they respond. If they stay true, you've found someone rare and dangerous in their own way. If they waver, you've found their price. This rule is also a defensive weapon. If you assume everyone has a price, then you're also prepared to protect against betrayal. You understand that under the right conditions, even your closest allies could become threats. That doesn't mean you live in paranoia, but in awareness. You manage people like a chessboard, not a family dinner. This logic plays out in modern politics and business constantly. Lobbyists don't assume integrity, they assume interests. Corporate raiders don't win through trust, they win by offering the right deal to the right person at the right time. Even in diplomacy, price often comes in the form of political capital, strategic trade-offs, or power sharing. And the most effective players are those who understand. No one acts purely out of principle. There's always a pressure point. The beauty of this rule is that it turns human nature into a tool. If you know someone's price, you control them. Not through threats, not through friendship, but through leverage, through knowledge. And that kind of control is quiet, effective, and nearly impossible to detect. So Machiavelli would advise, don't hope people are loyal. Find out why they're loyal, and then ask yourself, what would make them stop? If you don't know the answer, someone else might figure it out before you and use it against you. Manipulate hope, but never fulfill all of it. Hope is one of the most powerful motivators in human psychology. It can move crowds, inspire armies, and sustain loyalty through the harshest conditions. Machiavelli knew this well, and he also understood its darker side. If you give people everything they hope for, they no longer need you. But if you give them just enough, you keep them dependent. This is the cold logic behind one of his most manipulative but effective rules. Manipulate hope, but never fulfill all of it. Hope creates momentum. It keeps people striving, dreaming, and believing that tomorrow will be better if they stay close to you. As a leader, if you can manufacture and maintain that belief, you don't need to rule through fear alone. Hope makes people willing to tolerate difficulty, postpone reward, and even sacrifice for a vision they believe in. But here's the trap. The moment you fulfill all of their hopes, two things happen. First, they grow complacent. Second, and far more dangerously, they start imagining new hopes, new dreams, new needs. And if you can't deliver on those, they turn bitter. Disappointment festers where once there was devotion. Machiavelli understood that full satisfaction is a dangerous thing. It breeds boredom, entitlement, and eventually rebellion. That's why smart rulers and leaders always leave something just out of reach, a promotion that might come next year, a reform that's being considered, a better future just beyond the next campaign, the next project, the next battle. This tactic isn't just about delay, it's about control. When you manage people's hopes, you shape their decisions. You keep their eyes on the future instead of the present. You direct their dissatisfaction away from you and toward the promise of progress. And when done well, they'll never stop chasing the carrot you're dangling in front of them. It works because people would rather believe than confront. They'll choose illusion over harsh truth as long as the illusion is crafted with care. Give them symbols. Give them slogans. Give them just enough real improvement to make the dream seem alive. But never give them everything. That's when they stop needing you. Think about political leaders who rise on the back of sweeping promises. They never fulfill all of them. They deliver just enough to claim progress, but always leave more in the works. And the people? They keep hoping. They keep voting. They keep waiting. In personal power dynamics, the same rule applies. Don't give a follower everything they want. Don't reveal the full plan to an advisor. Don't solve every problem. Solve most, but leave one or two unresolved, not because you can't, but because doing so makes them look to you as the one holding the future. Machiavelli's advice here is as ruthless as it is brilliant. Use hope to keep people moving, but never let them arrive. Fulfillment is the end of control. Leave them dreaming, and they will follow forever. Keep the people dependent on your rule. Machiavelli's insights into control often cut deeper than mere strategy. They reveal the uncomfortable truths behind loyalty and submission. One of his most enduring rules is this: keep the people dependent on your rule. It's not enough to be admired. It's not even enough to be feared. If you want lasting power, people must need you. Why? Because when people are independent, financially, intellectually, emotionally, they start to form alternative power structures. They make their own decisions, think critically, and begin to weigh their loyalty against other options. But when their security, prosperity, and protection flow from you, they become bound to your survival. Your power becomes their power. Your fall becomes their fall. This is the heart of Machiavellian control. Dependency creates stability, not love, not loyalty. When people rely on you for jobs, protection, justice, or even identity, they'll overlook your flaws. They'll justify your failures. They'll even defend your rule, not because they believe in it morally, but because their life is built upon it. History has plenty of examples. Think of the Roman emperors who offered grain to the masses, bread and circuses, or modern political machines that keep regions dependent on government subsidies. The people in these systems may grumble, but they rarely rebel. Because to rebel would be to risk everything: their livelihood, their stability, their comfort. So how do you cultivate dependency without becoming a tyrant? You build systems that reward loyalty and punish independence, quietly. You make people's success contingent on your approval. You offer protection from enemies, real or imagined. You solve problems that you alone have the tools to solve. Over time, people stop thinking about whether you're right. They think only about what happens to them if you disappear. This isn't just a strategy for nations. It works in business, organizations, even personal dynamics. A powerful CEO might centralize control so completely that no division can function without them. An emotionally manipulative partner might create situations where their absence causes distress or chaos. In both cases, the person in power makes themselves indispensable. But Machiavelli also knew that dependency must be maintained with care. Too much, and people become resentful or feel suffocated. Too little, and they feel free to leave. The key is to make people feel empowered while quietly binding them to you, like giving them a long leash that still ties them to your throne. The final layer of this rule is subtle but deadly. When people are dependent, they will defend your actions for their own sake. They will become your defenders, your public relations team, your enforcers, not because they believe in your ideology, but because your power is their survival. And that's when you've achieved true rule, when people aren't just following you, but protecting you out of self-interest. Avoid flatterers, but use them as mirrors. Machiavelli warns rulers about one of the most seductive dangers in power: flatterers. They are more dangerous than open enemies because they don't wear a sword, they wear a smile. Flatterers whisper comfort, inflate ego, and blind the ruler to reality. And worst of all, they make themselves seem loyal, when in fact they are opportunists feeding off your vanity. But Machiavelli, ever the strategist, doesn't simply say, "Get rid of them." He offers a colder, more refined tactic: avoid flatterers, but use them as mirrors. What does that mean? It means that you must not be seduced by praise. But you can study what people choose to flatter. You can observe what they think you want to hear, and use that as a lens into how you're perceived and where your power lies. Flattery is performance. It reflects back not who you are, but who others think they must pretend you are. That false image is incredibly valuable if you're wise enough to see through it. If 10 people praise your wisdom when you know you've said nothing profound, you've learned how people fear contradicting you. And that fear tells you more about your environment than their words do. But let's be clear, surrounding yourself with yes men is the beginning of decline. Leaders who demand constant praise become isolated. They stop hearing hard truths. They begin to believe in their myth rather than the reality. That's how emperors fall, how businesses collapse, how revolutions begin, not from enemies, but from blindness at the top. Machiavelli argues that a wise ruler must create a space for honest counsel, but not too much of it. People should feel safe telling you the truth, but they should know that truth must be useful, not rebellious. You must train a small circle of advisors to be candid in private while keeping the flatterers at a distance, but close enough to observe. Think of a modern leader or CEO. The ineffective ones are those who let themselves be surrounded by people who agree with everything. The strong ones create feedback systems where criticism is encouraged but controlled. They listen, but they never let the criticism go public. And they watch the flatterers, not to believe them, but to understand what narrative is being shaped around them. Machiavelli would say this: if you believe your own flattery, you're finished. But if you study it, dissect it, use it as a reflection of the fear, loyalty, or ambition around you, then you've taken what is normally a poison and turned it into a tool, a mirror distorted but still useful. So yes, avoid flatterers, but don't cast them all out. Keep them close enough to observe and far enough not to control you. Their words are lies, but their patterns are truth. And power belongs to those who see through illusion without discarding its value. Keep power concentrated. It slips through many hands. Power is not a resource you can divide without consequence. Once you begin spreading it too thin, delegating too freely, sharing authority with too many, or appeasing various factions, you risk weakening your own position. Machiavelli understood this fundamental principle. Concentration of power is the foundation of control. The more hands it passes through, the more diluted it becomes, and eventually it slips away altogether. This isn't just about being a control freak. It's about understanding how influence works in human systems. Every time you give someone a piece of your authority, whether it's the power to make decisions, access to sensitive information, or control over others, you are creating a secondary power center. That person now has the ability to make moves independent of you. The more of those centers you allow to form, the harder it becomes to lead, to enforce, or to maintain loyalty. Suddenly, you're no longer steering the ship. You're negotiating with the crew on every turn. History is full of examples of rulers, CEOs, and political leaders who fell because they let their power fracture. Kings who handed too much land to nobles. founders who gave too much equity and control to partners, presidents who relied too heavily on their cabinets and lost the pulse of their base. It starts with trust and ends with a coup. Machiavelli never said, "Don't delegate." Delegation is necessary, but it must be tactical, not emotional. You don't give power to make someone feel important or liked. You assign it when it serves your long-term dominance, and you watch it closely. You must always remain the final word. Everyone beneath you should be aware that their authority comes not from divine right, not from consensus, but from you. You give it. You can take it back. Consider this in a business setting. The founder of a company begins handing decision-making power to department heads who then start forming their own internal cultures, sometimes even at odds with the founder's vision. If the founder doesn't assert control, the company fractures. Competing loyalties form. Departments begin making moves that serve themselves, not the whole. What happens next? Internal politics, power struggles, and eventually the collapse or ousting of leadership. Or in a family estate or legacy situation. A patriarch who lets children or relatives take control of different assets without a centralized vision will soon see his legacy pulled in multiple directions, possibly into ruin. Why? Because he allowed power to scatter instead of remaining at center of gravity. Power must radiate from you, not orbit around others. When decisions are centralized, accountability is clear. Loyalty is focused. Strategy is unified. When power is scattered, confusion reigns, and the one who initially held it ends up begging for it back. Machiavelli's warning is cold but essential. Power shared without control is power surrendered. Keep it close. Keep it visible. And never let others forget where it starts and ends. Never let your right hand know what your left is doing. This timeless rule is about strategic secrecy. Machiavelli was a master of subtle manipulation, and one of his core beliefs was that transparency, while popular in moral philosophy, is a liability in real-world power. When others know too much about your intentions, your plans, your moves, they gain leverage. But when you keep your actions compartmentalized, you remain unpredictable, unassailable, and always one step ahead. What does it mean, practically, to keep your right hand from knowing what your left is doing? It means not showing your full hand, not even to those close to you. It means dividing knowledge and power among your inner circle in such a way that no single person sees the full picture. It means creating plausible deniability, not just externally, but internally as well. In politics and high-stakes business, this is common practice. A leader might assign separate tasks to different departments without telling each team what the other is doing. Why? Because this prevents collusion, rivalry, or sabotage. It also prevents any one individual from gaining enough insight to challenge or undermine the leader. Each part sees a fragment. Only the leader holds the whole. There's also a psychological edge to this strategy. When people are unsure of your plans, they're cautious. They don't overstep. They move carefully. You create an aura of mystery, not through deception for its own sake, but through inaccessibility. People respect what they can't fully read. Leaders who are too transparent lose that mystique. They become easy to predict and easy to attack. This rule also protects against betrayal. If no one knows your full plan, no one can completely sabotage it. Even if someone turns against you, their knowledge is incomplete. They can cause trouble, but they can't destroy you. That's the brilliance of the split-hand method. Each hand does its work, but neither one knows the strategy above it. Apply this in real life, and it becomes a powerful habit. When building a company, don't share your entire long-term plan with every investor or employee. Share what's relevant to their role, and only what they need to know to do their job well. When navigating politics, whether in office or in your own organization, Keep your alliances fluid and your positions flexible. Don't reveal your allegiances until you must. Let others guess, wonder, and wait. This is not about being dishonest. It's about being disciplined in communication. It's about understanding that information is power, and too much transparency makes you vulnerable. Machiavelli would say, "The one who knows everything about you controls you. The one who knows nothing fears you." So protect your moves. Speak less than you know. Show less than you plan. Let one hand act while the other waits, and no one will ever quite see your whole design until it's too late. When power is questioned, respond with strength, not words. Machiavelli understood something fundamental about authority. It is fragile the moment it is challenged. Once someone questions your legitimacy, your decisions, or your control, you are no longer simply in power, you are defending it. And when that happens, your next move defines whether you stay on top or begin to fall. In The Prince, Machiavelli repeatedly warns that appearances are not enough once power is contested. In the early stages of rule or influence, yes, smiles, promises, and gestures of goodwill help. But once someone questions your authority outright, talking will no longer suffice. They've already crossed the line of doubt. Now they're watching to see what you'll do next. And if all you do is respond with words, pleas, explanations, or justifications, you lose ground. Fast. That's because words, once power is challenged, signal uncertainty. They can sound defensive. They invite debate. They give the challenger a platform and make you appear as though your position needs to be explained rather than enforced. This is why Machiavelli believed in swift and unmistakable demonstrations of strength. Not cruelty for its own sake, but action that communicates, "This is not up for negotiation." Take historical examples. When Napoleon faced rebellion, he didn't debate with dissenters. He crushed uprisings with decisive force, then explained later. When Margaret Thatcher faced striking coal miners in the 1980s, she didn't soften her position. She outlasted them with firm policy and policing, establishing herself as the Iron Lady. In both cases, power was questioned and met with strength. This doesn't always mean violence or authoritarianism. It means visible consequences. If an employee undermines your decision in front of a team, your immediate, firm correction, not an email later, shows you are in command. If a rival company encroaches on your territory, a swift legal or marketing response, not a press statement about fairness, signals control. If a political opponent challenges your credibility, decisive action, not over-explaining, restores authority. The danger of using only words is that they rarely close the matter. They invite further discussion. They create space for critics to twist the narrative, and the longer that space exists, the more your influence erodes. People begin to wonder if you're really in charge, if you're still willing to act. Machiavelli's advice is simple but stern. Use power like a blade, not a banner. When it's time to prove you have it, don't wave it, swing it. And swing it once, hard enough that you don't have to swing again. Because in the world of power, hesitation breeds rebellion. And when your rule is questioned, your answer must be written in force, not in ink. A slow response is a signal of weakness. In the game of power, speed is not just an advantage, it's a language. Every action you take or fail to take sends a message. And when that action is delayed, the message is almost always the same: hesitation, confusion, or fear. Machiavelli saw this not only in politics, but in every aspect of leadership. When you respond slowly, others interpret it as a crack in your control, and they exploit it. Why is speed so important? Because uncertainty creates space, and in that space, rivals step forward. Doubt spreads, loyalty weakens. People begin to test boundaries, wonder who's really in charge, or, even worse, start making decisions without you. Machiavelli believed a prince must be decisive, even in imperfect conditions. If you wait until all the facts are in, until everything is perfect, you've already lost time, and likely control. That's why he preferred action over caution. He understood that fast decisions, even risky ones, project confidence. They say, "I'm in charge, I don't flinch." This rule applies everywhere. In politics, a slow response to crisis weakens a leader's grip. Citizens don't care about committee reviews. They want command. In war, delays can be fatal. Victory often belongs to the side that moves first, not the side that moves best. In business, hesitation in the face of competition signals to the market and to your employees that you're reactive, not proactive. Let's bring it closer to daily life. Say you lead a team and a problem arises. A conflict, a customer complaint, a missed deadline. If you wait 3 days to address it, you've told your team that urgency is optional, that you're unsure. Even if your final decision is correct, the delay has already caused erosion. But if you address it quickly, even if imperfectly, you keep morale, control, and trust intact. That's why strong leaders don't just act, they act early. They don't need perfect knowledge. They need enough to move. Because while you're gathering more intel, your enemy is already positioning, your team is growing anxious, and your competitors are seizing opportunity. Machiavelli would argue that the world punishes slow leaders not because they're wrong, but because they appear weak. And in leadership, perception is often more powerful than truth. You don't have to know everything. You have to signal strength. That signal is clearest when your reaction is quick and commanding. Of course, speed doesn't mean recklessness. It means prepared decisiveness. It means building systems that allow you to move fast, surrounding yourself with people who can give you rapid insights, and practicing the mental discipline to act under pressure. Because when you move slow, others assume you've lost your edge. And once they sense that, they start circling. In the world Machiavelli described, and in ours, the slow become prey. So move, decide, act. Even a flawed decision made now can be corrected. But a flawless one made too late? That's already a failure. Fortune must be beaten into submission. To Machiavelli, the concept of fortune, or fortuna as he called it, was not a goddess to be worshipped, but a wild, dangerous force to be tamed. In The Prince, he writes with brutal clarity, "Fortune is like a raging river. It can flood, destroy, and change everything in an instant." But the wise and powerful man doesn't stand back in awe. He builds levees. He digs trenches. He prepares to master it, not submit to it. In other words, fortune must be beaten into submission. Most people live at the mercy of chance. They chalk up success to luck. They blame setbacks on misfortune. And while there is some truth in that, life is indeed unpredictable, Machiavelli's view is that this unpredictability only defeats the passive. Those who sit and hope for favorable winds are the ones swallowed when the storm comes. The great ones, the princes of history, don't wait. They act with force, boldness, and timing that seizes control of destiny rather than succumbing to it. Fortune favors the bold, yes, but not the reckless. Machiavelli advocates for calculated aggression. When opportunity appears, don't overthink it. Strike. When chaos erupts, don't retreat. Move faster. Because fortune may open a door, but it doesn't wait for you to calmly walk through it. It slams shut unless you kick it open with urgency and intent. And when fortune turns against you, which it inevitably will, what matters is not how well you complain or cope. What matters is whether you adapt. That's what Machiavelli admired most. Men who could pivot, improvise, and push back with even greater force. He believed that success came down to two things: virtu, personal strength, will, skill, and fortuna, external circumstance. You can't control the second, but you can dominate the first. That domination, your strength, your preparation, your ability to think and move faster than the chaos, that's how you beat fortune into submission. Not through hope, but through readiness. Through the development of habits that withstand disruption. Through alliances, resources, influence, and above all, relentless motion. Modern life is full of examples. The entrepreneur who pounces on a gap in the market while others hesitate. The politician who turns scandal into advantage by controlling the narrative. The general who attacks before the enemy regains footing. These are not lucky people. These are people who trained themselves to master fortune when others bowed to it. So Machiavelli's challenge is clear. Don't wait to be rescued by fate. Dominate your circumstances before they dominate you. Use your mind, your strength, your preparation to force chance to work in your favor. You don't need the gods on your side. You need action, vision, and nerve. Because in Machiavelli's world and in ours, fortune punishes hesitation, but it bows to those who dare to beat it, stir fear through unpredictability. One of the most psychologically powerful tactics in Machiavelli's playbook is also one of the most unnerving. Be unpredictable. When you create uncertainty in the minds of others, whether allies or enemies, you stir fear at a primal level. And fear, as Machiavelli insists throughout The Prince, is a far more reliable tool than love when it comes to maintaining control. Why is unpredictability so effective? Because humans crave patterns. Predictability feels safe. It allows people to plan, to plot, and to prepare. The moment you become predictable, whether as a leader, a boss, a ruler, or even a parent, people figure you out. They know how far they can push. They know when you'll fold. They know exactly how to navigate around you. And that's when respect begins to erode. But when people can't quite pin you down, when they aren't sure how you'll respond, they begin to tread more carefully. They pause before attacking. They hesitate before disobeying. That hesitation is your advantage, and Machiavelli would advise you to use it ruthlessly. This doesn't mean being erratic or chaotic. It means being strategically unpredictable. It means breaking your own patterns deliberately. Reward someone when they expect punishment. Go silent when they expect a speech. Strike on the day they thought you'd retreat. This unpredictability creates psychological space, a zone of discomfort, where you are always underestimated, never fully understood. The best leaders in history, the ones who instilled lasting fear, all used this tactic. Think of Napoleon's battlefield movements. Think of Steve Jobs suddenly changing entire product plans at the last second. Think of Winston Churchill's defiant radio speeches when everyone expected surrender. These men weren't chaotic. They were deliberately difficult to predict, and that's what made them powerful. Fear doesn't just come from cruelty. It comes from the unknown. People fear what they can't anticipate. And when you become a wild card, people begin to act as if you might strike at any moment, even when you don't. That's power. It creates self-regulation in those around you without you having to lift a finger. But here's the warning. Unpredictability must be grounded in competence. If your behavior lacks strategy, if it's seen as weakness or impulsiveness, it backfires. People don't fear incompetence, they exploit it. Your unpredictability must always carry the threat of consequence. People must know that stepping out of line might provoke a response, and that uncertainty keeps them in line. Machiavelli knew this kind of psychological warfare was more effective than any law or army. It's not enough to be strong. You must be unreadable, not emotionless, but unpredictable enough to keep others on edge. Because when people are on edge, they behave. When they feel safe, they scheme. In the end, fear is not always about punishment. Sometimes it's simply the fear of what you might do next. And that fear, once planted, grows into obedience. That's Machiavellian strategy at its coldest and most brilliant. You are either being used or you are using. Machiavelli saw life as a battlefield of interests. Behind every smile is a strategy. Behind every alliance, a hidden motive. And at the center of all interactions lies a harsh binary truth. You are either being used or you are using. To Machiavelli, there was no such thing as a neutral relationship. Everyone in your orbit has a purpose, a need, or a goal. If they see you as a stepping stone, a resource, or a shield, they will use you, whether they do it gently or ruthlessly. And if you are not conscious of this fact, you become a pawn in someone else's game. Power, he believed, is never static. You're either building it, preserving it, or losing it. And if you're not actively using people to serve your objectives, your strategy, your security, your legacy, then someone else is using you to serve theirs. It's that simple. This rule strips away the polite illusions we like to live under. We want to believe in loyalty, mutual respect, and pure intentions. Machiavelli didn't deny that these can exist, but he argued they're rare and often temporary. In times of comfort, people seem loyal. In times of crisis, true motives surface. That's when you find out who was using whom. This isn't a call to paranoia. It's a call to clarity. If you want to lead, you must assume that others are acting in their own interest. You must learn to see the game underneath the words. Why is this person offering to help? Why are they siding with you now? What do they gain from this alliance? These aren't cynical questions. They're strategic ones. And if you're wise, you'll learn to play the same way. Use people ethically, tactically, and intelligently. Identify their strengths and weaknesses. Understand their desires. Then position yourself as the answer to their needs, but always in a way that also serves your own goals. It's not exploitation. It's mutual utility, with you as the dominant force. Great leaders, from Julius Caesar to Steve Jobs, have understood this. They built inner circles not of friends, but of functionaries. People who were useful. People who could be trusted to act in alignment with the leader's objectives, not because they were moral, but because their interests were tied to the leader's success. Machiavelli would ask you to reflect. Who is using you right now? A colleague pretending to admire you? A friend pulling favors while giving none in return? A partner relying on your strength while weakening your own? And more importantly, who are you using? Do you have influence? Are you shaping others to move toward your goals, or are you simply being carried along by stronger wills? In a Machiavellian world, innocence is not a virtue, it's a liability. The longer you go unaware of how you're being used, the more damage you'll suffer. The solution? Wake up. See the game. And if you must choose, and you must, then always choose to be the one using, not the one used. Never reveal the full extent of your plans. If power is a game, then strategy is your weapon. And Machiavelli made it clear, never show your full hand. A ruler who reveals everything invites sabotage. A leader who explains every move gives others the tools to stop him. To survive, to dominate, to win, your plans must be layered, elusive, and controlled like a well-timed ambush. This rule is both defensive and offensive. On the one hand, it protects you. If people don't know what you're truly after, they can't block you. They can't expose you. They can't prepare for your next move. On the other hand, it gives you control over perception. You can create distractions, false trails, or partial truths to keep others guessing. Machiavelli believed this was especially vital in court politics, where everyone was watching everyone else for signs of weakness. A prince who openly declared his intentions invited resistance. Rivals would form coalitions, advisors would plot, even allies might try to beat him to the prize. But the prince who kept his intentions hidden could move freely, strike suddenly, and bend outcomes in his favor before anyone realized what was happening. People crave certainty. They want to understand your goals so they can predict your actions. That desire is a weapon because you can manipulate it. Tell them what they want to hear. Let them believe they know your direction. Then, at the right moment, pivot. By the time they see the real plan, it's too late. In today's world, this rule is more important than ever. Whether you're managing a business, leading a team, or negotiating a deal, information is leverage. If you reveal your entire strategy, people will analyze it, critique it, find holes in it. They may even steal it. But if you share just enough to inspire trust, while keeping your true objectives concealed, you maintain the upper hand. This isn't about lying, it's about timing. Every plan has layers. Some can be shared, others must be kept private until the execution is already underway. The danger lies in over-explaining, in assuming that transparency equals strength. In Machiavelli's world, transparency is vulnerability. There is also the psychological power of mystery. When people don't fully understand your plans, they respect you more. They overestimate you. They fear your unpredictability. That fear, that uncertainty, gives you space to move. It buys you time, loyalty, and advantage. Even within your closest circle, caution is key. Share different parts of your plan with different people. That way, no single person can betray the whole. Keep everyone slightly in the dark, and only you will see the full board. So remember Machiavelli's rule. Never give away the ending before the story begins. Let them think they've figured you out. Let them relax. And when the time is right, strike with a plan they never saw coming. Success erases sins. Failure reveals them. In Machiavelli's brutal philosophy of power, the world doesn't remember how you played the game, only whether you won. And in this world, success is the ultimate absolution. It's a kind of divine eraser that wipes away cruelty, deception, betrayal, and even injustice. If you succeed, people rewrite your story. They call you visionary, strategic, necessary. But if you fail, every minor sin becomes a crime. Every choice is dissected. Every motive is questioned. This rule taps into a dark but observable truth. People justify outcomes, not processes. If a leader lies but wins a war, that lie is reframed as necessary strategy. If a CEO cuts corners and the company thrives, those cuts are called bold decisions. Success doesn't just protect, it transforms. It rebrands your sins into wisdom. Why? Because people want to believe they followed a winner. They want to believe that power is righteous because it succeeded. That's why victors write the history books and often edit their own flaws right out of the narrative. Failure, on the other hand, flips the spotlight. Suddenly, everything becomes visible. The mistakes that were ignored when things were going well are now seen as fatal flaws. The allies who cheered you on now distance themselves, rewriting their loyalty as caution. Even good decisions are reframed as poor judgment. Failure makes your sins undeniable, not because they're new, but because now there's no shield to hide them. This is especially true in public leadership. Take a political figure who lies to gain public trust. If they win the election and deliver results, that lie is rationalized. Everyone does it, people say. It was for the greater good. But if they lose or their term collapses in scandal, that same lie becomes the center of a moral reckoning. Their character is attacked, their legacy questioned. The lie didn't change. The outcome did. Machiavelli urges us to understand this dynamic, not to become immoral, but to become strategically moral. Be aware that public opinion is fluid. It bends to victory. So if your actions are controversial or even brutal, ensure they lead to a visible win, because results not only silence critics, they convert them. There's also a personal angle here. When you're on the rise and things are going well, people will let your flaws slide. You'll get more chances. People will make excuses for you. But don't mistake that for genuine forgiveness. It's conditional acceptance, tied directly to your performance. Fail, and that goodwill vanishes. People will remind you of every misstep, and they won't be kind about it. So what's the lesson? Don't play for applause. Play for the win. The applause comes later, and only if you succeed. Focus on the outcome, because once you have it, your methods will be reinterpreted through the lens of victory. People won't remember how you made the sausage, only that they ate well. But if you fail, they'll call the kitchen a crime scene. When you rise, destroy the ladder. Machiavelli would never advise you to leave your escape route open or let others follow too closely in your footsteps. One of his coldest yet most enduring pieces of advice can be distilled into this rule: when you rise, destroy the ladder. In other words, once you ascend to power, eliminate the path that could bring others up behind you, or worse, pull you down. This is about consolidation. It's not enough to win power. You have to secure it, defend it, and lock it in place. That means removing the means, allies, and infrastructure that helped you get there. Because those tools can also be used by someone else. The very people who helped you climb can become the next threat. Their ambitions were useful when they served you, but now they must be contained, neutralized, or discarded. In Machiavelli's world, gratitude is not a strategy. It's a liability. The political graveyard is filled with rulers who left power too accessible to their subordinates or failed to cut ties with the people who knew too much. Loyalty is temporary. Ambition is permanent. So once you've gained your position, it is not betrayal to eliminate threats. It is prudence. Take historical examples like Stalin, who methodically removed everyone who had helped him rise in the Soviet hierarchy. Or Napoleon, who sidelined many of his early allies once he secured imperial control. These men understood that the power structure that lifts you can also strangle you if you leave it intact. This rule also applies in business and personal power dynamics. Suppose you climb to the top of a company by building alliances, leveraging mentors, or working within a certain system. Once you're in control, you must restructure that system to favor you, and only you. You reward who must be rewarded, but carefully and with strings attached. You don't leave the same open channels that got you in place wide open for others to follow. The idea is not just about sabotage, it's about control of opportunity. You make it so that the position you now hold is only reachable through your permission. You become the gatekeeper, and if anyone tries to rise independently, their progress is stalled, misdirected, or quietly destroyed. This isn't cruelty, this is power maintenance. But Machiavelli would also warn you not to make the destruction of the ladder obvious. You must do it with subtlety. Let others believe the opportunity is still there. Let them strive for it, exhaust themselves, become dependent on your favor, and ultimately realize the game was rigged all along, but too late to challenge it. Because in the end, a ruler who wants to stay in power must do more than rule well. He must ensure no one else can rule in his place. Power is not a team sport. Once you ascend, the game changes. It's no longer about climbing, it's about making sure no one climbs behind you. That is how empires, dynasties, and legacies survive.